A pregnant cashier was humiliated by her manager in front of a crowded store. But the quiet customer watching from the back wasn't just anyone, he was a billionaire, and the child she carried was his. Before we start the story, tell us in the comments what city you are watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. She stood behind the register, swollen ankles throbbing, her uniform stretched tight over a belly she never planned to carry. The manager's voice sliced through the fluorescent-lit aisles like a blade, each insult landing in front of customers who turned their heads to watch the spectacle. But in the back of the store, partially hidden behind a display of canned goods, a man in a perfectly tailored coat went perfectly still. His hand tightened around the handle of his shopping basket until his knuckles went white, because he'd been searching for her for 6 months. And the child she carried? It was his. A mistake that would bind them together in ways neither could have ever imagined. But to understand the crushing weight of that moment, we have to go back. Back to where it all began. Back to when she still had dreams. The studio smelled like sweat, hairspray, and ambition. Tessa's reflection stared back at her from the wall-length mirror, her dark hair pulled into a high ponytail, her face flushed from 2 hours of relentless choreography. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not when she was this close. Again! The choreographer's voice cracked like a whip. Tessa, your timing on the second verse is off. Again! She nodded, swallowing the exhaustion, and reset her position. The music kicked in loud, pulsing, electric. Her body moved on instinct now, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought couldn't keep up. Spin, step, drop. She hit every mark. She had to. In 3 weeks, she'd be on stage. Not in this cramped practice room with its scuffed floors and peeling paint, but under blinding lights, in front of thousands of fans. Her debut, the culmination of 7 years of training, of sacrifice, of proving to everyone, especially herself, that she was good enough. The music cut off abruptly. Better. The choreographer's approval was stingy, but Tessa clung to it like a lifeline. But you're still hesitating on the turn. I need confidence. I need power. You're debuting as the main dancer, Tessa. Act like it. Yes, ma'am. The other trainees were already packing up, slinging bags over their shoulders, whispering excitedly about the showcase next month. Tessa grabbed her water bottle and took a long drink, her heart still hammering in her chest. This was it. Everything she'd worked for. She could feel it building, that electric anticipation that made her skin hum. Hey, superstar. A familiar voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to find Lily, her roommate and fellow trainee, grinning at her. Lily had made it through the final cuts, too. She'd be debuting as a vocalist. They'd suffered through this journey together. 2 girls from nowhere who'd clawed their way into one of the most competitive entertainment companies in the country. You were on fire today, Lily said, bumping Tessa's shoulder. I almost felt bad for the backup dancers. You're making them look like amateurs, Tessa laughed, the tension in her chest loosening just a fraction. Stop. You know I'm a disaster compared to the seniors. Please, in 3 weeks, you're going to own that stage. Lily's smile faltered just for a second. You feeling okay, though? You look a little pale. I'm fine, just tired. You've been tired for like 2 weeks straight, and you barely ate lunch. I'm fine, Tessa repeated, a little more firmly this time. She didn't have the luxury of being anything else. Fatigue was part of the game. You pushed through it, You smiled through it. You danced until your feet bled, if that's what it took. Lily didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. Okay, but seriously, if you pass out during rehearsal, I'm dragging you to the clinic myself. Deal. They left the studio together, stepping out into the cool evening air. The city sprawled before them, glittering and alive, a landscape of neon signs and honking taxis and endless possibility. Tessa loved this city, loved the noise, the chaos, the way it never slept. It felt like the only place big enough to hold all her dreams. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A reminder. Doctor's appointment tomorrow, 10 a.m., wellness checkup. Right. The company required all trainees to get a full health screening before debut. Standard procedure. Blood work, physical exam, the whole 9 yards. They needed to make sure their idols were in peak condition. Tessa had put it off as long as she could. She hated hospitals, hated needles, hated the sterile smell that clung to everything, but there was no avoiding it now. "What's that face for?" Lily asked. "Doctor's appointment tomorrow, the pre-debut screening." "Oh, fun. I had mine last week. It's not that bad. Just a blood draw and some boring questions." Tessa nodded, pocketing her phone. "Yeah, I know. But," as they walked toward the subway station, weaving through the evening crowd, a strange unease settled in her stomach. It wasn't the appointment itself. It was something else. Something she couldn't name. A whisper of instinct that told her something was about to shift. She shook it off. She was just tired, anxious. That's all. By this time tomorrow, the checkup would be done, and she could get back to what mattered. The debut, the stage, the dream she'd been chasing her entire life. If only she'd known. If only she'd listened to that whisper. Maybe then she would have run. Maybe then she would have turned around and never set foot in that hospital. But she didn't, and by tomorrow afternoon, her entire world would shatter. The hospital was busier than Tessa expected. She sat in the waiting room, clutching her purse in her lap, watching a steady stream of patients cycle through. A young couple with a newborn, an elderly man leaning heavily on a cane, a woman in business attire tapping impatiently at her phone. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too sterile. Everything here felt cold, clinical, like the walls themselves were designed to strip away anything soft or human. "Tessa Wilde?" She looked up. A nurse stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, her expression pleasantly neutral. Tessa stood, her legs stiff from sitting too long, and followed the nurse down a narrow hallway. The smell hit her immediately antiseptic, and faintly medicinal, the kind of smell that made her throat tighten. "Just a routine checkup today, right?" the nurse asked, glancing at her clipboard. "Yeah, pre-debut health screening for the entertainment company." "Oh, how exciting." "Are you nervous?" Tessa managed to smile. "A little. You'll do great, I'm sure." The nurse led her into a small examination room and gestured to the chair. "Have a seat. We'll start with some basic questions, then move to the blood draw and physical." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of mundane questions. Any allergies? No. Any family history of illness? Not that she knew of. She'd been in the foster system since she was 8. Any medications? No. The nurse scribbled notes, her pen scratching softly against paper. "All right, let's get that blood draw done." She reached for a tray of supplies: tourniquet, antiseptic wipe, needle. Tessa looked away, focusing on a faded poster on the wall about proper hand-washing technique. She hated this part. Always had. The Tijuana needle pinched. She flinched. Almost done, the nurse murmured. You're doing great. The vial filled with dark red blood. 1, 2, 3. Finally, the nurse withdrew the needle and pressed a cotton ball to Tessa's arm. Hold that there for a minute. We're almost finished. Tessa nodded, pressing the cotton ball down, her arm throbbing faintly. She just wanted to get out of here, get back to the studio, get back to normal. Okay, the nurse said, standing. I'll be right back. Just need to drop these samples off at the lab. Sit tight. The door clicked shut, and Tessa was alone. She let out a long breath, leaning back in the chair, her eyes drifting shut. The room was too quiet. The hum of the ventilation system, the distant murmur of voices in the hallway, it all felt surreal, like she'd stepped into some liminal space between the life she knew and something else entirely. She didn't know how long. She sat there. 5 minutes? 10? Time felt strange in places like this. When the door finally opened, a different nurse stepped in. Older, tired-looking. She carried a small tray with a syringe. Tessa Wilde? The woman asked, barely glancing. At her, yes. All right, I need you to roll up your sleeve. This will just take a second. Tessa blinked. Wait, didn't we just do the blood draw? The nurse frowned, glancing down at her clipboard. This is for the immunization. It's listed here. I didn't think I needed any shots today. It's required by your company. Says so right here. The nurse tapped the clipboard impatiently. We're running behind schedule, so if we could just… Okay. Tessa rolled up her sleeve, her unease growing. Something felt off, but she couldn't pinpoint what. Maybe she'd misunderstood the requirements. Maybe the first nurse had forgotten to mention it. The needle slid in, sharp and cold. Tessa winced, looking away. All done. The nurse withdrew the syringe, slapped a bandage over the injection site, and turned to leave. You're free to go. Check out at the front desk. And just like that, she was gone. Tessa sat there for a moment, staring at the bandage on her arm. That same whisper of unease curled through her chest, louder now, more insistent. Something's wrong. But she didn't know what, and she didn't have time to figure it out. She grabbed her purse, stood, and walked out of the examination room. The hallway was just as bright, just as sterile, just as suffocating. She made her way to the front desk, checked out, and stepped into the sunlight outside. The city noise washed over her cars, honking, people shouting, the distant wail of a siren. Normal, safe, real. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and headed for the subway. By tonight, she'd be back in the studio, back in front of the mirror, back to chasing the dream that was finally within reach. She had no idea that the injection she'd just received wasn't an immunization. She had no idea that in a lab 3 floors above the examination room, a frantic technician was staring at a chart, her face drained of color, realizing she'd just made a mistake that would ruin lives. She had no idea that the syringe had contained an embryo meant for someone else, someone who'd signed contracts, who'd agreed to carry a child for money, who'd understood exactly what she was walking into, and she had no idea that in 4 weeks, when the nausea started and wouldn't stop, when the test came back positive, when her debut was canceled and her contract was terminated, and the company's lawyers started circling like vultures, she'd realize that the dream was over, that the nightmare had just begun. But for now, she walked. She didn't know. And for just a few more weeks, she was still Tessa Wilde, the girl who was going to be a star. Across the city, In a glass-walled office that overlooked the skyline like a throne room, a man named Dominique Laurent sat behind a desk that cost more than most people's cars. He was 30 years old, handsome in that sharp, unattainable way that came from good genes and better tailoring. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly fitted, and his dark hair was swept back from a face that women called striking and men called intimidating. He looked every inch the billionaire heir. He was old money, old power, old expectations, and right now he looked utterly exhausted. "Dominic, sweetheart, you're not even listening." He blinked, refocusing on the woman sitting across from him. His mother, Isabelle Laurent, was elegant in the way only truly wealthy women could be, with understated jewelry, a cream-colored dress that probably cost 5 figures, her silver hair styled in a soft wave. She was smiling at him, but there was a familiar edge to it. The edge that said she was about to push him into something he didn't want to do. "I'm listening," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Then what did I just say?" He sighed. "You said you and Dad and Grandmère are very excited about the baby, and that you've already started redecorating the East Wing nursery." "See? You were listening." Her smile widened. "I knew you'd come around to this idea eventually." "I haven't come around to anything. I agreed to have a child because you 3 wouldn't stop harassing me about it. That doesn't mean I'm thrilled about the situation. You'll feel differently when the baby arrives." "Will I?" "Of course you will. You're going to be a wonderful father." Dominic said nothing. He wasn't so sure. Fatherhood required something he wasn't convinced he possessed: warmth, patience, the ability to love someone unconditionally. He'd spent his entire life in a world where everything was conditional. Every relationship was transactional. Every smile had a motive. He'd learned to navigate that world with ruthless efficiency. But a child? A child required something real, something he didn't know how to give. But his family had been relentless. His parents, his grandparents, all of them pushing, pleading, insisting that the Laurent legacy needed an heir, that he needed to think about the future, that he couldn't let the family name die with him. And so he'd made a deal. No marriage, no relationship, no messy emotions, just a surrogate. Clean, clinical, detached. The agency had handled everything. They'd found a woman healthy, educated, no criminal record. She'd signed the contracts, undergone the medical procedures, and in 9 months, Dominic would have a child. His family would be satisfied, and he could go back to his life. Simple. "When is the surrogate due again?" his mother asked, sipping her tea. 7 months? And you've met her? Once. Briefly. At the contract signing. And? And what? What did you think of her? Dominic shrugged. She seemed fine, professional. You didn't feel anything? Why would I? His mother's expression softened, something almost sad flickering in her eyes. "Oh, Dominic." "Don't," he said, his voice sharper than he intended. "Don't start with the lectures about opening my heart, or whatever it is you're about to say. I did what you asked. I'm giving you a grandchild. That's enough." Isabel set down her teacup, her gaze steady. "Is it, though? Is it really enough for you?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. His phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen. A message from his assistant. "Meeting with the board in 10 minutes. I have to go," he said, standing. His mother stood as well, smoothing her dress. "All right. But Dominic?" He looked at her. "This child is going to change your life, whether you're ready for it or not." He didn't respond, just grabbed his jacket and left the office, his mother's words echoing in his head. Change his life. Right. He'd believe that when he saw it. But as he walked down the hallway, past assistants and executives who stepped aside for him like he was royalty, a strange thought occurred to him. What if she was right? What if this child, this tiny, hypothetical person he'd agreed to create, actually did change everything? He shook the thought away. It didn't matter. The plan was set. The contracts were signed. In 7 months, he'd have a child, and life would go on, neat, controlled, exactly the way he liked it. He didn't know that at that exact moment, 3 miles away, a technician was discovering a mistake, a catastrophic, life-altering mistake. He didn't know that the surrogate he'd met, the professional, healthy woman who'd signed all the right papers, wasn't pregnant. Someone else was. And when he found out, when he learned that a complete stranger was carrying his child because of a medical error that should never have happened, everything he thought he knew about control, about detachment, about his carefully ordered life, it would all come crashing down. But for now, he walked. He didn't know. And the clock was ticking. 4 weeks later, Tessa's world didn't just crack, it exploded. She'd noticed the exhaustion first, the kind that sleep couldn't fix, that clung to her bones like a weight she couldn't shake. Then came the nausea. It started as a faint queasiness in the mornings, easy to dismiss as nerves or bad food. But it got worse. By the 2nd week, she was barely keeping anything down. By the 3rd, she was sprinting to the bathroom between rehearsals, her stomach twisting itself into knots. "You need to see a doctor," Lily had said, her face tight with worry. "This isn't normal. It's just stress," Tessa had insisted, even as her hands trembled around her water bottle. "The debut's in 2 weeks. I'm fine." But she wasn't fine, and deep down, she knew it. The test came back positive on a Tuesday. Tessa stared at the 2 pink lines, her vision blurring, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. No, this wasn't possible. She couldn't be. She took 3 more tests, all positive. The world tilted sideways. She sat on the bathroom floor of her tiny shared apartment, the tile cold against her legs, and tried to make sense of it. Pregnant. She was pregnant. But how? She hadn't been with anyone. Not in over a year. Not since that disastrous relationship with a fellow trainee that had ended in heartbreak and a company policy violation. She'd been too focused, too driven, too consumed by the dream, to even think about dating. So how? Her phone buzzed. A message from the company manager. "Rehearsal in 30 minutes. Don't be late." She couldn't go. She couldn't stand up. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Another buzz. "Tessa, where are you?" "We're starting in 5. She forced herself to stand, to wash her face, to pull her hair back. She shoved the tests into the trash, buried them under tissues and packaging, like hiding the evidence would make it less real. Then she grabbed her bag and ran. The rehearsal was a disaster. She missed cues, stumbled through choreography she could have done in her sleep. The choreographer yelled. The other trainees whispered. And when it was finally over, when she was dismissed with a sharp warning to get it together, she walked out of the building and kept walking. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Away from the studio, the noise, the expectations. She ended up in a park, sitting on a bench as the sun set, watching families walk by. Parents pushing strollers, kids chasing each other across the grass. Normal lives. happy lives. Lives she'd never have now, because if the company found out and they would find out it was over, idols didn't get pregnant. Not before debut, not without permission, not without a carefully managed narrative. This wasn't a scandal they could spin. This was a termination waiting to happen. She pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking, and called the hospital where she'd had her checkup. "Hello, this is Tessa Wilde. I had a wellness screening with you a few weeks ago, and I need to speak to someone. I think there's been a mistake." The receptionist transferred her. She waited, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "Ms. Wilde?" A woman's voice, clipped and professional. "This is Dr. Raina Park. I understand you have some concerns." "I'm pregnant," Tessa blurted out, "but I don't understand how. I haven't. There's no way I should be—" A long pause. "Ms. Wilde, can you come to the hospital? Today, if possible. There's something we need to discuss." The cold fear in Tessa's stomach turned to ice. "What do you mean?" "Please, just come in. As soon as you can." The hospital conference room felt like a courtroom. Tessa sat across from Dr. Park, a lawyer in a gray suit, and a hospital administrator, whose name she immediately forgot. The air was thick with tension, with words that hadn't been said yet, but hung there like a guillotine waiting to drop. Dr. Park folded her hands on the table. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Tessa could see the strain around her eyes. "Ms. Wilde, I need to explain something to you, and I need you to stay calm." "I'm calm," Tessa lied, even though her hands were clenched so tight in her lap that her nails dug into her palms. "4 weeks ago, you came in for a routine wellness screening. During that appointment, you received what you believed to be an immunization shot." "Yes." "It wasn't an immunization." The room seemed to tilt. Tessa gripped the edge of the table. "What?" Dr. Park's voice was steady, clinical, like she was reciting from a script. "There was a procedural error. A nurse administered the wrong injection. What you received was an embryo transfer, a procedure meant for another patient who was scheduled for an IVF surrogacy appointment that same day." The words didn't make sense. They were sounds, syllables, but they didn't connect to anything real. Tessa shook her head. That's not possible. You can't just—" "It shouldn't be possible," the lawyer interjected. "And we take full responsibility for this error. The nurse in question has been terminated, and we are prepared to offer you a settlement to—" "A settlement?" Tessa's voice cracked. "You're offering me money? We understand this is incredibly distressing." "Distressing?" She laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "You injected me with someone else's baby, without my consent, without even telling me, and you think money is going to fix that?" "Ms. Wilde," Dr. Park said gently, "we know this is overwhelming, but we need to discuss your options. The pregnancy is still very early. If you choose to terminate, terminate." The word landed like a punch. "It's your choice, of course. We will support whatever decision you make. But there are complications." "What complications?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "The embryo belongs to a client, a very prominent client. He paid for the IVF procedure, and legally, he has certain rights." "Rights?" Tessa's voice rose. "Rights to what? My body?" No, Dr. Park said quickly. "You have full autonomy over your body and your medical decisions. No one can force you to continue or terminate this pregnancy. But the biological father has been notified of the error, and he will likely want to be involved in— Who is he?" Silence. "Who Is the father? Tessa demanded, her voice shaking. The lawyer and the doctor exchanged glances. Finally, Dr. Park spoke. His name is Dominic Laurent. The name meant nothing to Tessa. She stared blankly. Who? He's a very wealthy man. His family owns Laurent Industries. They're one of the largest conglomerates in the country. Wealthy? Of course. Because this nightmare couldn't just be simple. It had to involve someone powerful. Someone who could bury her if he wanted to. Does he know? Tessa asked. Does he know it's me? Not yet, but we are required to inform him. And once he's informed, we expect he'll want to meet with you. Tessa stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need to leave. Ms. Wilde, please. I need to leave. Her voice was barely a whisper now. I can't do this right now. Dr. Park stood as well, her expression softening. I understand. But please, think about what we've discussed, and if you need anything, counseling, legal advice, medical care, we will provide it. Free of charge. Tessa didn't respond. She grabbed her bag and walked out, her legs moving on autopilot. Down the hallway, through the lobby, out into the street. The city was loud and bright, and utterly indifferent to the fact that her life had just imploded. She walked for hours, past shops and cafes and people living their normal, uncomplicated lives, and with every step, the reality settled deeper into her bones. She was pregnant, with a stranger's child, a billionaire's child, and there was no way, no possible way that this ended well. Dominic Laurent received the call during a board meeting. His assistant knocked on the conference room door, her face pale. Mr. Laurent, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent call from St. Grace Hospital. They say it's critical. Every head in the room turned to him. Dominic frowned, irritation flickering through him. Take a message. They said it's about the surrogacy. His blood went cold. He stood, his chair sliding back with a sharp scrape. Excuse me. He took the call in his office, the door closed, his jaw tight. This is Dominic Laurent. Mr. Laurent, this is Dr. Raina Park from St. Grace Hospital. I'm calling regarding the IVF surrogacy procedure you contracted with us. Has something happened to the surrogate? A pause. A long, terrible pause. Mr. Laurent, there's been a serious error. The embryo was not implanted in the surrogate you contracted with. His grip on the phone tightened. What do you mean? Due to a procedural mistake, the embryo was administered to the wrong patient, a young woman who came in for a routine checkup. She was never meant to be part of the surrogacy program. The words hung in the air like smoke. Dominic's mind raced, trying to process, to make sense of what he was hearing. You're telling me that some random woman is pregnant with my child? Yes. How does that happen? There was a staffing error. A nurse confused the patients. We have already begun a full investigation, and the responsible party has been terminated. Terminated. Dominic's voice was low. Dangerous. You think firing someone fixes this? Mr. Laurent, I understand you're upset. Upset? You've just told me that my child is being carried by a complete stranger because your hospital is incompetent. Upset doesn't begin to cover it. We are taking full responsibility, and we are prepared to discuss compensation. I don't want compensation. I want to know who this woman is. Another pause. Her name is Tessa Wilde. She's 23 years old. She was scheduled to debut as an idol with a major entertainment company, but, given the circumstances, that's no longer happening. Dominic closed his eyes, his mind spinning. An idol. A kid, practically. And now her life was ruined because his family had pushed him into this surrogacy plan, because he'd signed contracts with a hospital that couldn't manage basic procedures. "I want to meet her," he said. "Mr. Laurent, I don't think I want to meet her," he repeated, his voice like steel. "Set it up." He hung up before she could argue. For a long moment, he stood there, staring out the window at the city below. The Huis skyline stretched endlessly, glittering in the afternoon sun. From up here, it all looked so small, so manageable. But his life had just spun out of control. A stranger was carrying his child. A woman who hadn't asked for this, who hadn't signed up for any of it. And now, they were both trapped in a situation neither of them wanted. He thought about calling his parents, telling them, but he couldn't. Not yet. Not until he figured out what the hell he was going to do. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Lunch tomorrow? Your grandmother wants to talk about baby names." He almost laughed. Baby names. Right. Because that was the priority now. He typed a response. "Can't. Something's come up." He didn't elaborate, didn't explain. Just pocketed the phone and sank into his chair, his hands pressed to his face. This was supposed to be simple, detached, clean. And now it was a disaster. Now there was a girl out there, Tessa Wilde, whose life he'd inadvertently destroyed. And somehow he had to fix it. Tessa didn't tell anyone for 3 days. She went to rehearsals, smiled when she was supposed to smile, danced when she was supposed to dance, and at night she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her hand pressed to her stomach, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. On the 4th day, the company called her into the office. She knew before she even walked in. Knew from the way the manager wouldn't meet her eyes, from the HR representative sitting stiffly in the corner, from the termination papers already laid out on the desk. "Tessa," the manager said, his voice flat, "we've been made aware of your condition." Of course they had. The hospital must have told them. Or maybe someone had seen her leaving the clinic. It didn't matter. The result was the same. "You're pregnant." It wasn't a question. "Yes," she whispered. "Then I'm sure you understand that we can no longer proceed with your debut." "Please," she said, and she hated how small her voice sounded. "Please, it wasn't my fault. There was a mistake at the hospital. I didn't even know." "It doesn't matter how it happened," the manager interrupted. "The fact is, you're pregnant, and that is a direct violation of your contract. We have no choice but to terminate your agreement with the company." The HR representative slid the papers across the desk. "You'll need to vacate the trainee dormitory within the week. Any company property must be returned, and you are not to contact any current trainees or staff." Tessa stared at the papers. 7 years. 7 years of training, of sacrifice, of dreaming. Gone. Just like that. "I have nowhere to go," she said quietly. "That's not our concern." Something inside her cracked. She stood, her legs shaking, and picked up the papers. "Fine, Tessa. I said fine." She turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind her. She made it to the stairwell before the tears came. Great, heaving sobs that tore through her chest, that left her gasping for air. She sank onto the steps, her arms wrapped around herself, and cried until there was nothing left. When she finally stood, her face puffy and her eyes red, she felt hollow, empty. But she couldn't stay here, couldn't fall apart. Not yet. She had 1 week to figure out where she was going to live. 1 week to figure out how she was going to survive. And somewhere, out there, a billionaire named Dominique Laurent was probably planning how to take her child. She didn't know that yet. Didn't know that in 2 days, she'd receive a call asking her to meet him. Didn't know that when she finally saw his face, something unexpected would flicker between them. But for now, she walked down the stairs, out of the building, and into a future that had never felt more terrifying. The dream was dead, and the nightmare was just beginning. The coffee shop was neutral territory. That's what Dr. Park had called it when she'd arranged the meeting. Neutral. As if there was anything neutral about sitting across from the man whose child you were accidentally carrying. As if a table and 2 cups of coffee could somehow soften the absolute insanity of this situation. Tessa arrived 15 minutes early. She'd barely slept the night before, her mind racing through 1,000 different scenarios. What would he look like? What would he say? Would he be angry? Would he blame her? Would he try to force her to give up the baby? She ordered a chamomile tea. Her stomach couldn't handle coffee anymore and chose a table in the back corner, away from the windows, away from prying eyes. The last thing she needed was someone recognizing her. Not that anyone would anymore. She wasn't Tessa Wilde, the soon-to-be idol. She was just Tessa Wilde, the girl who'd lost everything. She'd moved out of the trainee dormitory 3 days ago. Lily had cried when she'd helped her pack, had offered to let Tessa stay with her. But Tessa had refused. She couldn't drag her friend down with her. Couldn't risk the company punishing Lily for associating with someone they'd discarded. So she'd found a tiny studio apartment on the outskirts of the city. 1 room, a bathroom the size of a closet, a kitchenette with a hot plate and a mini-fridge. It was all she could afford with the little savings she had left, and even that would run out in a few months. The bell above the door chimed. Tessa looked up, and her breath caught. Dominique Laurent walked into the coffee shop like he owned it. Maybe he did. She wouldn't be surprised if his family's conglomerate had stakes in half the businesses in the city. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead in a way that was somehow both careless and perfectly styled. His coat was charcoal gray, expensive, tailored to fit his broad shoulders. His face was sharp, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, dark eyes that swept the room with the kind of cold assessment that came from years of weighing people's worth in seconds. He was, objectively, the most attractive man Tessa had ever seen, and she hated him on sight, not because of how he looked, but because of what he represented. Wealth, power, control, everything she didn't have, everything she'd never have. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved, just stared at each other across the crowded coffee shop like 2 fighters, sizing each other up before a match. Then he walked toward her, his expression unreadable. Tessa forced herself to sit up straighter, to meet his gaze, to not let him see how terrified she was. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. He stopped at her table. "Tessa Wilde?" His voice was deep, measured, the kind of voice that was used to being obeyed. "That's me." He gestured to the chair across from her. "May I?" "It's why we're here." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or amusement, but it was gone before she could identify it. He sat, folding his hands on the table, and for a long moment he just looked at her, studying her, like she was a problem he needed to solve. You don't look like an idol, he said finally. Tessa bristled. What's that supposed to mean? I don't know. I expected someone more polished, put together. Yeah, well, it's hard to stay polished when your entire life implodes in a week. His jaw tightened. Fair enough. Silence settled between them, thick and uncomfortable. Tessa wrapped her hands around her tea, grateful for the warmth, for something to hold on to. I'm sorry, Dominic said. She blinked. What? I said. I'm sorry. For what happened? This wasn't supposed to. You weren't supposed to be involved in any of this. No, I wasn't. Her voice was sharper than she intended, but she didn't care. I was supposed to debut. I was supposed to be on stage in 2 weeks. Instead, I'm sitting here, pregnant with a stranger's child, because your hospital screwed up. It's not my hospital. You know what I mean. He nodded slowly. You're right. And for what it's worth, I am going to make sure they're held accountable. But that doesn't change what's already happened. No, Tessa said quietly. It doesn't. Another silence. Heavier this time. Dominic leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving hers. The hospital said you're keeping it. The baby. It wasn't a question, but Tessa answered anyway. Yes? Why? The question caught her off guard. She frowned. Why? Why? Are you keeping it? You didn't ask for this. You could terminate the pregnancy. Move on with your life. Tessa's grip on her tea tightened. Is that what you want me to do? I'm asking what you want. I want my life back, she said, her voice cracking. I want to go back to 4 weeks ago and never walk into that hospital. I want to debut. I want to dance. I want everything that was stolen from me. But I can't have that. So yeah, I'm keeping the baby, because it's the only thing I have left. Dominic's expression softened, just slightly. I can't imagine what you're going through. No, Tessa agreed. You can't. He looked away, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. Finally, he spoke. I want to help. Tessa laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Help? How exactly are you going to help? Financially. I'll cover all your medical expenses, housing, whatever you need. And when the baby is born, you want to take it. Her voice was flat. That's what this is about, isn't it? You want me to carry your baby and then hand it over. That was the original plan, Dominic said carefully, with the surrogate. But this is different. You're not a surrogate. You didn't sign a contract. So no, I'm not going to take the baby from you. But I am the biological father. And I do want to be involved. Involved how? I don't know yet. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping into his voice. I don't have a plan, okay? This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to have a child with some random woman I've never met. But here we are, and we need to figure out how to navigate this. Tessa stared at him, her mind racing. He seemed genuine, or at least he seemed like he was trying to be. But trust didn't come easy to her. Not anymore. What if I don't want you involved? Then we'll go to court, Dominic said bluntly. And I'll fight for custody. I have resources, Tessa. Lawyers. Money. I can make this very difficult for you. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Tessa's stomach twisted. So that's it? You're threatening me? I'm being honest with you. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. I could have lied. I could have pretended I'd just walk away. But I won't. That baby is mine as much as it's yours, and I'm not going to abandon my child. You were perfectly fine, abandoning it to a surrogate. That was different. How? Because she agreed to it. Because there were contracts and boundaries and expectations. This, he gestured between them. This is chaos. And I don't do chaos. I need structure. I need a plan. Well, I don't have a plan, Tessa snapped. I don't have anything. I lost my career. I lost my home. I'm living in a studio apartment that I can barely afford. And in a few months, I'll have a baby. I have no idea how to take care of. So, forgive me if I'm not ready to sit here and strategize with you. Dominic's expression shifted. For the first time since he'd sat down, he looked uncertain. Vulnerable, almost. I know this is hard, and I know I'm not making it easier, but I'm trying. I'm trying to do the right thing here. The right thing? Tessa's voice rose, drawing a few curious glances from other customers. She lowered it, leaning forward. The right thing would have been not forcing your parents' wishes onto a surrogate in the first place. The right thing would have been the hospital, not screwing up. The right thing would have been my life not getting destroyed. But none of that happened. So don't sit there and tell me you're trying to do the right thing when the only reason we're in this mess is because of choices you made. He flinched. Actually flinched. Like her words had hit something raw. You're right, he said quietly. You're absolutely right. Tessa sat back, surprised. She'd expected him to argue, to defend himself. But he didn't. They sat in silence for a long moment. The coffee shop buzzed around them, conversations, laughter, the hiss of the espresso machine, normal life, a world that felt impossibly far away. I don't want to fight with you, Dominic said finally. I know I came on too strong, but I need you to understand something. I didn't ask for this either. I didn't want a child. I still don't know if I even want to be a father. But my family, they pushed me into this. And now that it's happening, I can't just walk away. I won't. Tessa studied him, really studied him. Beneath the expensive clothes and the cold exterior, she saw something she recognized: fear, uncertainty, the same things she felt. Maybe he wasn't the enemy. Maybe he was just as lost as she was. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to co-parent with someone I don't know. Someone who lives in a completely different world than I do. Then we'll figure it out, Dominic said. Together. One step at a time. And if we can't, then we'll deal with that when it happens. But let's at least try, for the baby's sake. Tessa hesitated. Every instinct told her to say no, to walk away, to protect herself and her child from this man and whatever complications he'd bring. But she was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being alone. Tired of pretending she could handle this by herself. Okay, she said softly. We'll try. Dominic's shoulders relaxed, just slightly. Okay, but I have conditions. His eyebrows rose. Conditions? You don't get to control my life. You don't get to tell me what to do or how to raise this baby. We make decisions together, as equals. Agreed. And if you ever threaten me again, if you ever use your money or your lawyers to intimidate me, I will disappear, and you'll never find me. Dominic held her gaze. I won't threaten you. I give you my word. Your word doesn't mean much to me, right? Now. Then I'll earn your trust. Tessa wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not anymore. We'll see, she said. He nodded. Fair enough. They exchanged phone numbers, made plans to meet again in a few days after they'd both had time to process. And when Dominic stood to leave, He paused, looking down at her. For what? It's worth, he said. I think you would have been a great idol. Tessa's throat tightened. Thanks. But that doesn't really help now, does it? No, he admitted. I guess it doesn't. And then he was gone, walking out of the coffee shop and back into his world of glass towers and endless money. Tessa sat there for a long time after he left, staring at her cold tea, her hand pressed to her stomach. She'd just agreed to let a billionaire into her life, into her child's life. She didn't know if it was the right decision, didn't know if she'd regret it. But it was done. The choice was made, and now she had to live with it. Dominic sat in his car for 10 minutes before he could bring himself to start the engine. The meeting had been, he didn't even know how to describe it, intense, raw. Nothing like the sterile, transactional arrangement he'd envisioned with the surrogate. Tessa Wilde was not what he'd expected. She was sharp, angry, broken in a way that made his chest tighten uncomfortably. And when she'd looked at him with those eyes dark and furious and terrified all at once, something had shifted in him. Something he didn't understand and wasn't sure he wanted to. He'd threatened her. Actually threatened her with lawyers and court. Battles like some kind of corporate shark. What the hell was wrong with him? She was right. This was his fault. Not directly, but the chain of events that led to this disaster started with him. With his family's relentless pressure. With his decision to use a surrogate. With his belief that he could control every aspect of his life. And now, there was a girl out there. A girl who'd lost everything carrying his child. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. How was your day, sweetheart? He stared at the message. He should tell her, should explain what had happened. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not until he figured out what the hell he was going to do. He typed a response. Fine. Busy. Talk later. He pocketed the phone and started the car. As he drove through the city, weaving through traffic, his mind kept circling back to Tessa. To the way she'd sat across from him, small and defiant, refusing to back down even though he could have buried her with a single phone call. She had fire, strength. And despite everything, despite the anger and the fear, there was something compelling about her. He shook the thought away. This wasn't about attraction. This wasn't about anything except figuring out how to co-parent with a stranger. But as he pulled into his building's underground garage and rode the elevator up to his penthouse, he couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she'd said, I want my life back, and how he was the reason she couldn't have it. The elevator doors opened. He stepped into his penthouse 30 floors of glass and steel and emptiness. The city glittered below him, beautiful and cold. He poured himself a drink, stood at the window, and for the first time in years, Dominic Laurent felt something he'd never allowed himself to feel. Guilt. 3 weeks passed in a strange, uncomfortable rhythm. Tessa and Dominic met twice more. Once at another coffee shop where they'd discussed logistics doctor's appointments, financial arrangements, boundaries. The conversation had been stiff, formal, like 2 lawyers negotiating a contract, rather than 2 people trying to figure out how to raise a child together. The second meeting had been at Dominic's lawyer's office. He'd wanted to draft an agreement. Nothing legally binding, he'd insisted, just something to clarify expectations. Tessa had brought a legal aid attorney, a tired woman with kind eyes, who'd taken her case pro bono, and they'd spent 3 hours hammering out the details. Dominic would cover all medical expenses. He'd provide a monthly stipend for Tessa's living costs. In return, he'd have access to all medical information and the right to attend appointments. After the baby was born, they'd establish a custody arrangement, 50-50 if possible. It was clinical, bloodless, exactly what Dominic seemed to prefer. But Tessa couldn't shake the feeling that they were building a house on sand, that this careful, controlled arrangement would collapse the moment something unexpected happened. And unexpected things always happened. She was 12 weeks along now. The nausea had started to ease, replaced by a constant, bone-deep exhaustion that made every day feel like climbing a mountain. She'd found a job, if you could call it that, stocking shelves at a discount grocery store on the night shift. The pay was terrible, but it was all she could get. No one wanted to hire a pregnant woman with no degree and a resume that listed former idle trainee as her only work experience. The night shift suited her, though. It meant fewer customers, fewer questions, fewer pitying looks when people noticed. Her growing stomach. She worked from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, then stumbled back to her tiny apartment to sleep through the afternoon. It was a miserable existence, but it was hers, and she'd learned a long time ago that survival didn't have to be pretty. On a Thursday night, or technically early Friday morning, Tessa was restocking canned vegetables when her phone buzzed a text. From Dominic, appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m. Dr. West's office. I'll meet you there. She stared at the message, her jaw tightening. He always did this. Sent information like he was issuing orders. Never asked if the time worked for her. Never considered that she might have a schedule, too. She typed a response. Have to sleep. I work nights. His reply came almost immediately. This is the only slot available for the next 2 weeks. It's important. Tessa bit back a curse. Of course it was important. Everything was important to Dominic Laurent. His time, his schedule, his need for control. She wanted to tell him no, wanted to say she couldn't make it, that he'd have to go without her. But this was a major appointment. The anatomy scan. The one where they'd check the baby's development, measure everything, maybe even find out the sex. She couldn't miss it, even if it meant losing a day of sleep. Fine. I'll be there. No response. He'd gotten what he wanted. Of course, he didn't bother to reply. Tessa shoved her phone back in her pocket and went back to stacking cans, her hands moving on autopilot while her mind churned with resentment. This was her life now, caught between the exhausting reality of survival and the suffocating presence of a man who treated fatherhood like a business transaction. She didn't know how much longer she could do this. The clinic was in a part of the city Tessa rarely visited, the kind of neighborhood where the buildings were clean, the sidewalks were spotless, and everyone looked like they'd just stepped out of a magazine. She felt out of place in her worn jeans and oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dominic was already in the waiting room when she arrived. He sat in one of the plush chairs, scrolling through his phone, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. He looked up when she walked in, his expression unreadable. "You're late," he said. "I'm 5 minutes late. I had to take 2 buses to get here." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or discomfort. But it was gone too quickly for her to read. "We should get you a car." "I don't need a car. I need you to stop scheduling appointments without asking if the time works for me. I told you this was the only available slot. And I told you I work nights, which means I need to sleep during the day. But you don't care about that, do you? You just care about checking boxes, making sure everything runs on your schedule." Dominic's jaw tightened. He stood, pocketing his phone. "Can we not do this here?" "Do what?" "Fight. We're about to see our baby. Can we have one meeting where we're not at each other's throats?" Tessa wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him that Maybe if he treated her like an actual person instead of an inconvenience, they wouldn't be fighting all the time. But she was too tired. And he was right. This wasn't the time or place. "Fine," she said quietly. They checked in at the front desk and were led to an examination room. The ultrasound machine sat in the corner, its screen dark and waiting. Tessa climbed onto the table, her heart pounding. She'd had ultrasounds before, quick, basic ones to confirm the pregnancy and check for a heartbeat. But this one was different. This one would show her the baby, actually show her what was growing inside her. Dominic took the chair beside the table, his posture stiff and formal, like he was attending a business meeting instead of a medical appointment. The door opened, and a woman in scrubs walked in, smiling warmly. "Hello, I'm Keisha, the ultrasound technician. You must be Tessa and Dominic." "That's us," Tessa said. "Great, let's get started." Keisha washed her hands and prepped the machine. "This is going to be cold," she warned, squirting gel onto Tessa's exposed stomach. Tessa flinched at the chill, then watched as Keisha pressed the wand to her skin and moved it slowly, searching. For a moment, there was nothing but static on the screen, gray and formless. And then, "There we go," Keisha said softly. The baby appeared. Tiny. Perfect. A little shape with a head and arms and legs, moving slightly, like it was waving. Tessa's breath caught. Her vision blurred with sudden tears. "That's my baby. That's real. That's a person." She'd known, intellectually, that she was pregnant. Had felt the nausea, the exhaustion, the changes in her body. But seeing the baby on the screen, alive and moving, made it real in a way nothing else had. "Oh my God," she whispered. Beside her, Dominic had gone completely still. His eyes were locked on the screen, his face pale. "Everything looks great," Keisha said, her voice cheerful as she took measurements, clicked buttons, pointed out tiny features. "Here's the head, spine, arms, legs. The heart rate is nice and strong. Do you want to know the sex?" Tessa looked at Dominic. He looked at her. "Do you?" she asked. "It's your choice. It's your baby, too." He hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, yes, let's find out." Keisha moved the wand, adjusted the angle, and grinned. "Congratulations! It's a girl." A girl. Tessa's hand flew to her mouth, a sob catching in her throat. She was having a daughter, a little girl who'd have her laugh, maybe, or Dominic's eyes, a little girl who'd grow up in a world so much more complicated than Tessa had ever imagined. She glanced at Dominic. His expression had cracked, just slightly. He was staring at the screen like it held every answer he'd ever been looking for. And his eyes, those cold, controlled eyes, were shining. "A daughter," he said quietly, almost reverently. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Tessa saw him as something other than a billionaire, something other than a threat. She saw him as a father, terrified and overwhelmed and utterly human. Keisha printed out pictures, handed them over with a warm smile, and left them alone in the room. Tessa sat up slowly, wiping the gel off her stomach, clutching the ultrasound photos like they were made of glass. Dominic hadn't moved. He was still staring at the now dark screen, his hands clenched in his lap. "Dominic?" He blinked, turning to her. "Yeah? Are you okay?" He opened his mouth, closed it. Then, to her complete shock, he laughed. A short, broken sound. "No, I'm not okay. I'm terrified. Join the club. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to take care of a kid. I don't even know how to take care of myself half the time. I just I pay people to do things for me, but I can't pay someone to be a dad. And what if I screw this up? What if I—" He stopped, his voice cracking. Tessa stared at him. This was the man who'd threatened her with lawyers, who'd sent curt texts and scheduled appointments without asking. And now he was sitting here, unraveling in front of her. "You won't screw it up," she said, surprising herself. "How do you know?" "Because you're scared. And people who don't care don't get scared." He looked at her, really looked at her, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. The acknowledgement that they were both drowning, both trying to figure out how to survive this. "I'm sorry," Dominic said quietly, "for being an ass, for scheduling things without asking, for treating you like you're not a person. You are, and you deserve better." Tessa didn't know what to say. An apology was the last thing she'd expected from him. "Thank you," she managed finally. "And I'm going to do better. I promise." "Okay." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the ultrasound photos heavy in Tessa's hands. "What do you think she'll be like?" Dominic asked suddenly. "Who?" "Our daughter." Tessa smiled, just slightly. "I don't know. Maybe she'll be stubborn like me. Or analytical like you. God help us if she's both." Tessa laughed, and for the first time in weeks, it felt genuine. Maybe they could do this. Maybe, despite everything, they could figure out how to coexist, how to raise a child together. Or maybe she was just desperate for hope. Either way, as they left the clinic together, stepping out into the bright afternoon sun, Tessa felt something shift. The wall between them hadn't come down, but it had cracked. Just a little. And that was enough. For now. 2 days later, Tessa's fragile sense of hope shattered. She'd just finished her shift at the grocery store and was walking to the bus stop when her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her pick up. "Hello? Is this Tessa Wilde?" A woman's voice. Clipped. Professional. "Yes? Who is this?" "My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm a reporter with City Observer. I'm calling about your relationship with Dominic Lauren." Tessa's blood ran cold. "What?" "We've received information that you're pregnant with Mr. Lauren's child as a result of a hospital error. We're running a story and wanted to give you a chance to comment." "No. No. 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 How did you— Is it true?" "I'm not commenting on anything." Tessa's voice shook. "Don't call me again." She hung up, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped the phone. A reporter. They knew. Someone had leaked the story. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Tessa Wilde. From idol to billionaire's baby mama? The shocking story. You haven't heard. Below it, a link. Tessa clicked it, her stomach twisting. The article was already live. Pictures of her old promotional photos from her trainee days next to pictures of Dominic at some charity gala. The headline screamed in bold letters. Medical scandal. Aspiring idol. Accidentally impregnated with billionaire's baby Tessa, read the first few lines, her vision blurring. In a shocking turn of events, sources have confirmed that Tessa Wilde, 23, a former trainee with Starlight Entertainment, is pregnant with the child of billionaire heir Dominic Laurent, 30, following a catastrophic medical error at St. Grace Hospital. Her phone started ringing. More unknown numbers, texts flooding in, social media notifications exploding. She turned off her phone with shaking hands and sank onto the bench at the bus stop. It was over. Whatever privacy she'd clung to, whatever chance she'd had at rebuilding her life quietly, it was gone. The world knew, and the nightmare had just gotten infinitely worse. The storm hit with the force of a hurricane. By the time Tessa made it back to her apartment, the story had gone viral. Not just locally, nationally. Trending on every social media platform, news outlets picking it up, spinning it, sensationalizing it. She'd turned her phone back on for 5 seconds and immediately regretted it. Hundreds of notifications. Missed calls. Messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. From strangers. From reporters promising money for her side of the story. She turned it off again and sat on her bed in the dark, her knees pulled to her chest, trying to breathe through, the panic clawing at her throat. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But it was, and there was no taking it back. Someone knocked on her door. Hard. Insistent. "Tessa Wilde, we know you're in there. Just a few questions." She didn't move, didn't breathe, just sat frozen until the knocking finally stopped, and footsteps retreated down the hallway. They'd found her apartment. Of course they had, because nothing in her life was allowed to be private anymore. Her phone buzzed, even powered off. Somehow it buzzed. No. Wait. That was her old phone, the one she'd shoved in a drawer weeks ago. She dug it out, her hands shaking. A text from Lily. "Tessa. Oh my God! I just saw the news. Are you okay? Where are you? Please tell me you're safe." Then another. "People are saying awful things. Don't read the comments. Please. Just call me." Tessa's chest tightened. The comments. She shouldn't look. She knew she shouldn't. She looked anyway. Her laptop was still open on the tiny desk in the corner. She pulled up the article, scrolled down to the comments section, and immediately wished she hadn't. Gold digger. She did this on purpose. How convenient that she accidentally got pregnant with a billionaire's baby. Yeah, right. She was a failed idol anyway. This is just her backup plan. Poor Dominic. He's probably being trapped. Another woman trying to baby-trap a rich man. Tale as old as time. Each comment was a knife. Sharp. Precise. Cutting deeper than she thought words could cut. They didn't know her. Didn't know what had happened. Didn't care. They'd already decided she was the villain in this story. Tessa slammed the laptop shut, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to hold herself together. But she was fracturing, splintering into 1,000 pieces. Her phone, the working one, buzzed again. A call from Dominic. She stared at it, torn between answering and throwing the phone across the room. Finally, she answered. "Did you do this?" Her voice was raw, accusing. "What? No, Tessa. I just found out. Someone leaked it. Someone who knew. And the only people who knew were me, you, the hospital staff, and your lawyers." It wasn't me. His voice was firm, steel beneath the calm. "I would never do this to you. To us." "Then who?" "I don't know. But I'm going to find out." A pause. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm home. Reporters were at my door. Pack a bag. I'm sending a car. I'm not going anywhere with you." "Tessa, you can't stay there. They know where you live. They're going to camp outside your building. They're going to follow you to work. They're going to make your life a living hell." "My life is already a living hell." Silence. Heavy and painful. When Dominic spoke again, his voice was softer. Gentler. "I know. and I'm sorry. But please, let me help. Let me get you somewhere safe." Tessa closed her eyes. She wanted to say no, wanted to tell him she didn't need his help, didn't need his money, didn't need anything from him. But she was so tired, and she didn't know what else to do. "Fine," she whispered, "but just for tonight." "Okay, the car will be there in 20 minutes. Pack light." "And Tessa?" "What?" "Don't look at the comments. Don't read any of it. None of those people know you, and they don't matter." He hung up before she could respond. Tessa sat there for a long moment, staring at her phone. Then she stood, grabbed a duffel bag from the closet, and started packing. The car was a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. The driver didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk, just loaded her bag into the trunk and drove. Tessa watched the city pass by, the lights blurring together, and wondered how her life had become something out of a nightmare. They drove for 30 minutes, leaving the cramped chaos of her neighborhood behind and entering a part of the city she'd only ever seen in magazines: wide streets, elegant buildings, trees that actually had space to grow. The car pulled up to a high-rise that seemed to pierce the clouds. The driver opened her door, and Tessa stepped out, craning her neck to see the top. She couldn't. It just went up and up, glass and steel glittering in the night. "This way, Miss Wilde." She followed the driver into a lobby that looked like something out of a luxury hotel. Marble floors, chandeliers, a concierge desk staffed by people in crisp uniforms. They nodded at her as she passed, their faces carefully neutral. The elevator ride was silent. They went up, and up, and up. When the doors finally opened, they revealed a private hallway with only one door. The penthouse. Of course. The driver knocked once, then stepped back. The door opened, and there was Dominic, still in his suit, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He looked exhausted, stressed, human. "Thank you, James," he said to the driver, who nodded and left. Dominic's gaze shifted to Tessa. "Come in." She hesitated, then stepped inside. The penthouse was obscene. Floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. An open-concept living space with furniture that was more art than function. A kitchen with gleaming countertops. And appliances Tessa didn't even recognize. Everything was white and gray and sterile. It looked like a magazine spread. Beautiful. Cold. Utterly impersonal. "You live here?" Tessa asked. "Yes. Alone?" "Yes." She couldn't imagine it. Living in a space this big, this empty, with no one to share it with. It seemed like the loneliest place in the world. Dominic set her bag down by the door. "You can take the guest room. It's down that hall, second door on the left. The bathroom's attached. There are towels and toiletries already stocked. How long am I staying?" "As long as you need to." "I have work tomorrow night." "Call in sick." "I can't afford to call in sick." Dominic turned to face her fully. "Tessa, you can't go back there. Not right now. The media frenzy is just getting started. If you go to work, they'll follow you. They'll harass your co-workers. They'll turn your workplace into a circus. So what am I supposed to do? Hide here forever? No. Just until things die down." And if they don't die down? He didn't have an answer for that. Tessa sank onto the couch, a stiff, uncomfortable thing that probably cost more than a car, and put her head in her hands. "This is a disaster." "I know. They're calling me a gold digger. They think I did this on purpose. I know. My life is over. Again. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse." Dominic sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. "We're going to fix this." "How?" "I don't know yet. But we will. I promise." Tessa laughed bitterly. "Your promises don't mean much to me, remember?" "Then let me prove myself." She looked at him. Really looked at him. His jaw was tight, his eyes dark with something she couldn't quite name. Guilt, maybe. Or determination. "Why do you even care?" she asked. "You didn't want this baby. You didn't want any of this. You could just pay me off and walk away. Let me deal with the mess." "Is that what you think of me?" "I don't know what to think of you." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My whole life, people have expected me to be a certain way. Cold, calculating, emotionless. And I've been good at it. Really good. It's how I survive in my world. But when I saw that ultrasound, when I saw our daughter, something changed. I can't explain it. But I can't walk away. Not from her. And not from you." Tessa's throat tightened. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to keep the walls up. But she was so tired of fighting. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Me too." "What are we going to do?" "We're going to take it one day at a time, starting with getting you through tonight." He stood and held out his hand. "Come on, I'll show you the guest room." Tessa stared at his hand for a moment, then took it. His grip was warm, steady, and for just a second, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd figure this out. The guest room was bigger than Tessa's entire apartment. A king-sized bed, with a duvet that looked like a cloud, a sitting area with a couch and a TV, a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. It was overwhelming, excessive, and yet, after the chaos of the last 12 hours, it felt like a sanctuary. Tessa showered, letting the hot water wash away the grime and the fear and the exhaustion. Then she put on the oversized t-shirt she'd artoyage, packed, and climbed into bed. The sheets were soft, impossibly soft. She sank into them and closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept spinning, replaying the comments, the article, the looks on the reporters' faces. She didn't know how long she lay there before her phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on, foolishly hoping for something, anything that wasn't hate. A text from an unknown number. "You think you're special? You're not. You're just another nobody who got lucky. Enjoy it while it lasts." Then another. "Home wrecker. You deserve everything that's coming to you." And another. "I hope you lose the baby." The world doesn't need another Laurent bastard. Tessa's hands shook. She wanted to throw the phone, wanted to scream, but instead, she just turned it off and buried her face in the pillow. She cried, quietly, so Dominic wouldn't hear. Cried for the life she'd lost, for the dream that had died, for the future that was so much darker than she'd ever imagined. And, when the tears finally stopped, she lay there in the dark, one hand on her stomach, and whispered to the tiny life growing inside her, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you're being born into this." But she wasn't sorry for keeping her, wasn't sorry for choosing to fight, even when everything was falling apart, because that little girl deserved a mother who wouldn't give up, who wouldn't run, who'd stand and face the storm, no matter how brutal it got. And Tessa would be that mother, even if it killed her. Dominic couldn't sleep. He stood at the window in his bedroom, staring out at the city below, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He rarely drank, hated the loss of control that came with it, but tonight he needed something to dull the edges. The leak had come from someone at the hospital. He was sure of it. His lawyers were already working on finding out who, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Tessa was suffering. Their daughter, God, he still couldn't believe he was going to have a daughter, was at the center of a media circus before she was even born. And it was his fault, not directly, but indirectly, because his family had pushed him into this surrogacy plan, because he'd agreed, because he'd thought he could control every variable, manage every outcome. He'd been wrong. His phone buzzed. A call from his mother. He considered ignoring it, but she'd just keep calling. So he answered. "Dominic, sweetheart, I just saw the news. Is it true?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." "Oh my God, how did this happen?" "The hospital made a mistake. The embryo was given to the wrong woman." A pause, then carefully. "And this woman, Tessa, she's keeping the baby?" "Yes." "Have you met her?" "Yes." "And?" "And what, Mother?" "What's she like? Is she trying to extort you?" Dominic's grip on his glass tightened. "No, she's not. She's a victim in this just as much as I am. Maybe more. But surely you've taken precautions, made sure she can't stop." His voice was sharp. "Tessa is not the enemy. She didn't ask for this. She lost everything because of this. So don't you dare insinuate that she's some kind of opportunist." Silence on the other end. "I'm sorry," Isabel said quietly. "You're right. I shouldn't have assumed. It's just, this is a lot to process." "I know. But I need you to trust me. I'm handling it. Does she need anything? We could help." "I've got it covered." Another pause. "When can we meet her?" "Not yet. She's dealing with enough right now. But she's carrying our grandchild, Dominic, our family's legacy. We have a right." "You have a right to nothing," Dominic said coldly. "This is my child, mine and Tessa's, and we'll decide when and how to involve the rest of the family." He could almost hear his mother's shock through the phone. "All right," she said finally. "But please, keep us updated. We care about you. And about the baby." "I will." He hung up before she could say anything else. Then he downed the rest of his whiskey and set the glass on the side table. He'd spent his entire life living by his family's rules, following their expectations, becoming the heir they needed him to be. But not anymore. This time, he was going to do things his way, even if it meant standing against everyone, including his own family. Because Tessa deserved better than to be treated like a scandal. And his daughter deserved better than to be born into a world where she was seen as a mistake. He'd make sure they got it, no matter what it cost him. Tessa stayed in the penthouse for 3 days. 3 days of hiding from the world. 3 days of watching the media circus from behind tinted windows and locked doors. 3 days of feeling like a prisoner in a gilded cage. Dominic had been surprisingly considerate. He'd given her space, hadn't hovered or demanded anything. In the mornings, he'd leave for work, and she'd have the entire penthouse to herself. In the evenings, he'd come home with takeout, always asking what she wanted, always making sure it was something she could stomach, and they'd eat together in awkward silence or stilted conversation. It was strange, domestic, in a way that felt both comforting and deeply uncomfortable. On the 4th morning, Tessa woke to find Dominic already gone. A note sat on the kitchen counter next to a cup of herbal tea that was still warm. "Had to leave early for a meeting. There's breakfast in the fridge." Make yourself at home. Make yourself at home. As if that were possible in a place like this. Tessa poured the tea down the sink. She hated herbal tea, but she didn't have the heart to tell him, and made herself toast instead. She ate standing at the window, looking down at the city that had once held all her dreams. From up here, everything looked so small. The people were ants. The cars were toys. The problems that had consumed her entire existence seemed distant and manageable. But they weren't, and she couldn't hide up here forever. Her phone buzzed. She'd started keeping it on again, though she'd blocked most of the numbers that had harassed her. This one was from Lily. I'm downstairs. The doorman won't let me up. Can you tell them it's okay? Tessa's heart squeezed. Lily. God, she'd been such a terrible friend these past few weeks. Hadn't returned most of her calls, hadn't explained anything properly, had just disappeared. She texted back quickly. Give me 2 minutes. She called down to the front desk, explained that Lily was a friend, and within minutes, there was a knock on the door. Tessa opened it to find Lily standing there, looking simultaneously relieved and furious. You're alive, Lily said. I'm alive. I've been losing my mind, Tessa. You disappear, the news breaks, and then nothing. Radio silence. I thought... Her voice cracked. I thought something had happened to you. I'm sorry. Tessa stepped aside. Come in. Lily walked into the penthouse and stopped dead. Her eyes went wide as she took in the space, the view, the sheer obscene wealth on display. Holy shit. Yeah. This is where he lives? Yeah. And you've been staying here? For a few days. Just until the media dies down. Lily turned to face her, and Tessa saw the tears in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? About any of it? The pregnancy? The hospital? The billionaire? Why did I have to find out from the news? Tessa's throat tightened. I couldn't. I didn't know how. We're best friends, Tessa. We've been through everything together. And you just shut me out. I'm sorry, Tessa said again, because what else could she say? I was trying to protect you. The company already terminated my contract. I didn't want them to punish you too. Punish me for what? Being your friend? You know how they are. Association is everything. If they thought you were still close to me, they might have. I don't care. Lily's voice rose. I don't care about the company, or my career, or any of it. You're my friend, and you were going through hell. And I wasn't there because you didn't let me be there. The words hit like a punch, because Lily was right. Tessa had shut her out, had convinced herself she was doing the noble thing, protecting her friend, when really she'd just been too scared and too proud to ask for help. I'm sorry, Tessa whispered, her eyes burning. I'm so sorry. Lily crossed the space between them and pulled Tessa into a fierce hug. Don't you ever do that again. You hear me? I don't care what's happening. I don't care how bad it gets. You don't shut me out. Tessa hugged her back, clinging to her like a lifeline. Okay, I won't. They stood there for a long moment, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying. So, Lily said, wiping her eyes, tell me everything, from the beginning. And Tessa did. She told her about the hospital appointment, the injection, the devastating realization that she was pregnant, about losing her debut, her contract, her apartment, about meeting Dominic, the awkward co-parenting arrangement, the media leak. By the time she finished, Lily looked like she'd aged 10 years. I don't even have words. That's the most insane thing I've ever heard. Welcome to my life. And this Dominic guy, what's he like? Is he treating you okay? Tessa hesitated. He's complicated, cold, mostly, very controlled, but he's trying, I think. Do you trust him? I don't know. Sometimes. And then other times, I remember that he's a billionaire who threatened me with lawyers the first time we met. And I think I'm insane for being here. Lily looked around the penthouse. It's a pretty nice prison, though. That's the problem. It doesn't feel like prison. It feels safe. And I hate that. I hate that I'm starting to rely on him. Why? What's wrong with accepting help? Because help comes with strings. And I don't know what his strings are yet. Lily sat down on the uncomfortable couch, patting the space beside her. Tessa joined her, and they sat in silence for a moment, staring out at the city. What are you going to do? Lily asked finally. I don't know. I can't go back to my apartment. Can't go back to work. Can't do anything without reporters swarming me. I'm stuck. So stay here. At least until things calm down. And then what? I can't live here forever. And even if the media moves on, my reputation is destroyed. No one's going to hire me. No one's going to want anything to do with me. Then screw them, Lily said fiercely. Screw all of them. You didn't do anything wrong, and anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time. Tessa wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that the truth mattered, that people would eventually see past the headlines. But she'd learned the hard way that the truth didn't matter. Only the story did. And the story everyone believed was that she was a gold digger who'd trapped a billionaire. I'm scared, Tessa admitted. For me, for the baby. I don't know how to raise a child in the middle of all this chaos. You'll figure it out. You're the strongest person I know, Tessa. And you're not alone. You have me. And apparently, you have a billionaire who's weirdly invested in making this work. Tessa laughed despite herself. When you put it like that, see? Could be worse. They spent the next few hours talking, really talking, the way they used to before everything fell apart. Lily filled her in on the company gossip, the other trainees, the comeback stage that was happening next week without Tessa. It hurt to hear about it, but in a distant way, like mourning something that had happened in another lifetime. When Lily finally left, promising to visit again soon, Tessa felt lighter than she had in weeks. Not fixed, not healed, but less alone. And that was something. Dominic came home to find Tessa asleep on the couch. She was curled up on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek, her face peaceful in a way he'd never seen when she was awake. She looked younger, like this, vulnerable. And for a moment, he just stood there, watching her. He'd been thinking about her all day, about the way she'd looked at him when he'd apologized, like she wanted to believe him, but couldn't quite let herself, about the strength it took for her to keep going when everything had been ripped away from her. She was remarkable. He hadn't expected that, hadn't expected to feel anything beyond obligation and responsibility. But here he was, coming home to check on her, bringing her favorite foods, making sure she was comfortable. When had this happened? When had she stopped being a problem to solve and started being something else? He grabbed a blanket from the linen closet and draped it over her carefully, trying not to wake her. She stirred slightly, murmuring something he couldn't make out, then settled back into sleep. Dominic retreated to his office, closing the door softly behind him. He had work to do, emails to answer, contracts to review, but he couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting back to Tessa, to the baby, to the impossible situation they were in. His phone rang. His father this time. Dominic. Richard Laurent's voice was deep, authoritative, the voice of a man used to being obeyed. "We need to talk." "About what?" "Don't play games. You know exactly what. Your mother told me about the situation. The girl, the pregnancy. Her name is Tessa." "Fine. Tessa. I want to meet her." "Not yet." "Not yet?" "Dominic, she's carrying my grandchild. I have a right." "You have no rights," Dominic said, his voice hard. "Not to her. Not to the baby. Not until I say so." A long, tense silence. "What's gotten into you?" Richard asked finally. "This isn't like you. You're usually so pragmatic, so logical. But you're acting like what? Like I care about someone other than the family business?" "Dominic, I'm done with this conversation. When I'm ready for you to meet Tessa, I'll let you know. Until then, stay out of it." He hung up before his father could respond. His hands were shaking. He'd never spoken to his father like that. Never directly defied him. The Laurent family was built on hierarchy, on respect, on unquestioning loyalty, and Dominic had just shattered all of it. But he didn't regret it. For the first time in his life, he was making a choice that had nothing to do with the family legacy, or the company, or the expectations that had suffocated him since birth. He was choosing Tessa and their daughter, even if it meant burning every bridge he'd ever built. Tessa woke to darkness. She sat up, disoriented, the blanket sliding off her shoulders. The penthouse was quiet except for the distant hum of the city outside. She checked her phone. Almost midnight. She'd slept for hours. A light was on down the hall. Dominic's office. She stood, stretching the stiffness from her body, and padded down the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and she could see him sitting at his desk, his head in his hands, looking utterly defeated. She knocked softly. "Dominic?" He looked up, and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he was carrying. "Hey," he said. "Sorry, did I wake you?" "No, Are you okay?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Honestly? No, I'm not." Tessa stepped into the office. "What happened?" "My family. They want to meet you, want to be involved." And I told them no. "Why?" "Because you're not ready. Because they'll overwhelm you. Because they'll try to control everything. And I won't let them do that to you." Tessa stared at him. "You're protecting me. From your own family?" "Yes." "Why?" Dominic stood, running a hand through his hair. "Because you deserve better. Because our daughter deserves better. And because I'm tired of letting my family dictate every aspect of my life." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Tessa took a step closer. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "A monster. A cold, ruthless billionaire who only cared about himself." "And now?" "Now? I don't know. You're still cold, still ruthless, probably. But you're also human. More human than I thought." Dominic smiled, just slightly. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is." They stood there, the space between them charged with something Tessa couldn't name. Understanding. Connection. Something that scared her almost as much as everything else. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for letting me stay here. For protecting me, for trying." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. Because you didn't have to do any of this. You could have walked away. Made this someone else's problem. But you didn't." Dominic stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "I couldn't walk away. Not from you. Not from her. Tessa's breath caught. Dominic, I know this is complicated. I know we're basically strangers. But I need you to know that I'm in this. Fully. Whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere. The sincerity in his voice nearly broke her. Because she wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that he meant it. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Okay, she said finally. Okay, he nodded, stepping back, giving her space. You should get some sleep. In an actual bed this time. Yeah, you too. I will. Soon. Tessa turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. Dominic? Yeah. I'm glad it's you. I'm glad she's yours. And before he could respond, she walked back to the guest room and closed the door softly behind her. Leaving Dominic standing alone in his office, those words echoing in his head, feeling something shift inside him that he couldn't quite name. Something terrifying. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. 2 weeks passed in a fragile peace. Tessa settled into a strange routine at the penthouse. She'd wake late, make breakfast while watching the city come alive below, and spend her days reading baby books Dominic had ordered or video chatting with Lily. In the evenings, Dominic would come home, and they'd eat together, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes in halting conversation that felt like two people learning a new language. The media frenzy hadn't died down. If anything, it had intensified. But from the safety of the penthouse, it felt distant, like a storm raging on the other side of thick glass. Tessa knew she couldn't hide forever. But for now, she let herself breathe. It was a Friday evening when everything shattered. Dominic had come home earlier than usual, his face drawn and tense in a way that immediately put Tessa on edge. "What's wrong?" she asked, as he set his briefcase down with more force than necessary. "We need to talk." Those 4 words. Never good. Tessa set down the book she'd been reading. "Okay. Talk." Dominic loosened his tie, poured himself a drink whiskey, neat, and downed half of it before speaking. "My family wants to meet you. Tomorrow. For dinner. You told them no, remember? I did. But they're not taking no for an answer. My mother called me 17 times today. My father showed up at my office. My grandmother, who I haven't spoken to in 6 months, left me a voicemail saying she was deeply disappointed in my behavior." Tessa's stomach twisted. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying we don't have a choice anymore. If we don't meet with them on our terms, they'll find another way. They'll show up here. They'll ambush you. They'll make this worse." "How could this possibly get worse?" Dominic finished his drink. "You'd be surprised." Tessa stood, pacing to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful. Deceptive. "I'm not ready." "I know. They're going to judge me. They're going to think I'm exactly what the media says I am. I won't let them." "You can't control what they think, Dominic." "No. But I can control how they treat you. And if they step out of line, we leave. No discussion." Tessa turned to face him. He was standing now too, his jaw set in that way that meant he'd made a decision and wouldn't be swayed. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "About what they think of me?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because you matter. And not just because you're carrying my child. You matter." The words landed between them, heavy and significant. Tessa's breath caught. She wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to push, but she was too scared of the answer. "One dinner," she said finally. And if it's awful, we never do it again. Deal. The Laurent estate was not a house. It was a monument. Tessa stared out the car window as they drove through ornate iron gates and up a tree-lined driveway that seemed to go on forever. The house? No. The mansion rose up before them like something out of a period drama. Stone and columns and perfectly manicured gardens. "You grew up here?" she asked, her voice small. "Unfortunately. It's beautiful. It's a prison." Tessa glanced at him. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw tight, his hands clenched in his lap. She'd never seen him this tense, not even when the media story broke. "We don't have to do this," she said. "Yes, we do." The car stopped at the front entrance. A man in a suit, a butler, Tessa realized with disbelief, opened her door and helped her out. She felt ridiculous in the dress Dominic had bought her. It was elegant, expensive, designed to make her look like she belonged in places like this. She didn't, and they'd know it the moment she opened her mouth. Dominic took her arm, his touch gentle but grounding. "Stay close to me. And remember, you don't owe them anything." The front door opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the doorway. Elegant, poised, silver hair swept up in a chignon, pearls at her throat, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Isabelle Laurent, Dominic's mother. "Dominic, darling." She stepped forward, kissing his cheeks in that air-kiss way wealthy people did. Then her gaze shifted to Tessa. "And you must be Tessa. How lovely to finally meet you." "Hello," Tessa managed. Come in, come in. Everyone's waiting in the sitting room." Everyone. Of course. The interior of the house was just as overwhelming as the exterior. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art that probably belonged in museums. Tessa felt like she was walking through a palace, not a home. They were led to a sitting room where 3 people waited. A man in his 60s, with Dominic's sharp features and cold eyes, Richard Laurent, the patriarch. A woman in her 80s with silver hair and an expression that could cut glass, Dominic's grandmother, Eveline. And a younger man, maybe 35, with a smirk that made Tessa's skin crawl, someone Dominic hadn't mentioned. "Tessa," Dominic said, his voice carefully neutral. "This is my father, Richard, my grandmother, Eveline, and my cousin, Julian." Julian. The way Dominic said the name was laced with contempt. "So this is the girl who trapped you," Julian said, his smirk widening. "I have to say, I expected someone more impressive." The room went silent. Dominic's hand tightened on Tessa's arm. "Apologize. Now." "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." "Julian, that's enough," Richard said sharply. "Is it? Because I think we all deserve to know the truth. How much is she asking for? A few million? 10? What's the going rate for accidentally getting pregnant with a Laurent heir?" Tessa felt the blood drain from her face. She wanted to run, wanted to disappear, wanted to be anywhere but here. But Dominic stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. "Get out!" Julian blinked. "What? You heard me. Get out of this house. Now." "Dominic, really?" Isabel began. "No, Mother. He insulted Tessa in front of all of you, and no one said a word. So either he leaves, or we do." "This is my house," Richard said, his voice hard. "You don't get to make demands. Then we're leaving." Dominic turned to Tessa. "Come, on." "Wait." Eveline's voice cut through the tension like a knife. The old woman stood, leaning on a cane, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Julian, leave." "Grandmother, I said leave. You've embarrassed this family enough for one evening. Julian's face flushed with anger, but he didn't argue. He stalked out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Eveline turned her attention to Tessa. Sit, child. Let's start over. Tessa glanced at Dominic, who nodded slightly. They sat on a beige sofa across from the older woman. I apologize for my grandson's behavior, Eveline said. Julian has always been unpleasant, but he doesn't speak for this family, doesn't he? Tessa asked, finding her voice. Because I'm pretty sure he said what everyone in this room was thinking. Isabel shifted uncomfortably. Richard's expression remained impassive. Only Eveline smiled a small, approving quirk of her lips. You have fire, the old woman said. Good. You'll need it. Grandmother, Dominic warned. Oh, hush. I'm not insulting her. Eveline turned back to Tessa. Tell me about yourself, and don't give me the sanitized version. I want the truth. Tessa took a breath. What do you want to know? Everything. Where you're from, what you wanted to be, how you ended up carrying my great-grandchild. So Tessa told her. Not everything, she left out the darkest parts, the moments she'd cried herself to sleep, the fear that consumed her most days. But she told enough. About growing up in foster care, about finding dance as her escape, about training for 7 years to become an idol, about the hospital error that destroyed her dreams. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Eveline studied her for a long moment. Then she said, You've had a hard life. I've had the life I was given. And now? What do you want now? Tessa looked at Dominic, then back at Eveline. I want to raise my daughter, give her a better life than I had. That's all. No interest in the Laurent fortune? No. None at all? I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask for any of this. If I could go back and change what happened, I would. But I can't, so I'm making the best of it. Eveline smiled again, wider this time. I like her. Richard cleared his throat. Mother, perhaps we should discuss. Discuss what? The child is coming whether we like it or not. The question is whether we're going to embrace her and Tessa, or whether we're going to drive Dominic away entirely. And based on the way he's looking at her, I'd say we're dangerously close to the latter. Tessa glanced at Dominic. His expression was carefully controlled, but his eyes were soft when they met hers. I want to be clear about something, Dominic said, addressing the room. Tessa is not asking for anything. She's not after our money or our name. She's a victim in this, just like I am, and I will not tolerate anyone treating her otherwise. Is that understood? Isabel nodded quickly. Of course, darling. Richard remained silent, but he inclined his head slightly. Acceptance, if grudging. Eveline laughed, a dry, crackling sound. Well, I think that settles that. Now, shall we eat? I'm starving. Dinner was a surreal experience. The dining room table could have seated 20, but they were clustered at one end. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery, course after course of food that Tessa barely tasted because her stomach was in knots. Conversation was stiff at first. Isabel asked polite questions about Tessa's health, the pregnancy, whether she was comfortable at Dominic's penthouse. Richard said almost nothing, just watched with those calculating eyes. But Eveline was different. She asked real questions. What music did Tessa like? What books? What did she dream about when she was a child? And slowly, impossibly, Tessa found herself relaxing. By the time dessert arrived, she was actually smiling, laughing even, At one of Eveline's stories about Dominic as a child, something involving a mud puddle and a very expensive suit. "I've never seen him so filthy," Eveline said, her eyes twinkling. His mother nearly fainted. "I did not nearly faint," Isabel protested. "I was simply concerned." "You called the housekeeper in tears," Dominic groaned. "Can we please not—" "No, no," Tessa said, grinning. "I need to hear this." And as Eveline continued the story, Tessa felt something she hadn't felt in months. Normal. Like she was just a woman having dinner with her boyfriend's family. Not a scandal wrapped in controversy. It couldn't last. She knew that. But for a few stolen moments, she let herself pretend. They were saying their goodbyes at the front door when Isabel pulled Tessa aside. "Can I speak with you? Privately?" Tessa glanced at Dominic, who nodded. "I'll wait in the car." Isabel led Tessa to a small parlor off the main entrance. She closed the door and turned to face her, her expression suddenly serious. "I need you to understand something," Isabel said. "Dominic has never been like this, never defied his father, never stood up to the family, never put anyone before the Laurent legacy. I don't understand. He's changing because of you, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a dangerous thing." Tessa's chest tightened. "I'm not trying to change him." "I know. But you are. And I need to know, are you going to stay? Or are you going to break his heart and disappear?" "I'm not going anywhere." "You say that now. But when things get hard, and they will get hard, will you still be here?" Tessa met her gaze steadily. "I'm carrying his child. I'm in this for the long haul, whether I want to be or not." Isabel studied her, then nodded slowly. "Good. Because if you hurt him, if you take advantage of him, if you turn out to be the opportunist the media claims you are, I will destroy you. Family protects family. Always." The threat was delivered with a smile, but it was a threat nonetheless. "Understood," Tessa said quietly. "Good." Isabel's expression softened. "Now, let's get you back to Dominic before he storms in here thinking I'm interrogating you. Which, I suppose, I am." They walked back to the front entrance together. Dominic was waiting by the door, his face tight with concern. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Fine," Tessa said, forcing a smile. "Your mother was just being protective." "That's one way to put it," Isabel said dryly. She kissed Dominic's cheek. "Drive safely, and call me tomorrow." The ride back to the penthouse was quiet. Tessa stared out the window, Isabel's words echoing in her head. "Are you going to stay? Or are you going to break his heart and disappear?" As if she had a choice. As if her heart wasn't already dangerously tangled up in this impossible situation. As if she wasn't terrified that the man sitting beside her cold, controlled Dominic Laurent was starting to matter to her in ways she couldn't afford. The penthouse felt different when they returned, smaller somehow, more intimate. The city lights glittered beyond the windows, but Tessa barely noticed them. She was too busy trying to process everything that had happened at dinner. Dominic poured himself another drink, his third of the night, she noted, and stood at the window with his back to her. "Your mother threatened me," Tessa said, finally. He turned, surprise flickering across his face. "What?" "Not in so many words. But she made it clear that if I hurt you, there would be consequences." Dominic's jaw tightened. "I'll talk to her." "Don't." Tessa crossed to the kitchen, needing something to do with her hands. She filled a glass with water. "She's protecting you. I get it. I'd probably do the same thing if our daughter brought home someone I didn't trust. You're not someone I brought home. This isn't a normal situation, No, it's not. Silence settled between them, thick with things neither of them wanted to say. Thank you, Tessa said quietly. For standing up for me tonight? For making Julian leave? I should have punched him. Probably would have made things worse. Would have felt good, though. Tessa laughed despite herself. Yeah, it would have. Dominic moved closer, setting his glass on the counter. They were standing too close now, close enough that Tessa could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes. I meant what I said, he told her. To my family. You're not the enemy, and anyone who treats you like one will answer to me. Why? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Why do you care so much? Dominic looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. I don't. No, he admitted. At first, it was just responsibility, obligation. But now, he trailed off, shaking his head. Now, it's more than that. More how? I don't know. I just know that when Julian insulted you, I wanted to tear him apart. And when my mother pulled you aside, I was ready to intervene. And when you're here, in this space, it feels less empty, less cold. Tessa's heart was pounding. Dominic, I'm not asking you for anything, he said quickly. I know this is complicated enough, but I need you to know that you're not just the woman carrying my child. You matter. To me. The words hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Tessa didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond to this confession that terrified her as much as it thrilled her. I should go to bed, she said finally, taking a step back. It's been a long day. Disappointment flickered across Dominic's face, but he nodded. Yeah, of course. Tessa walked toward the guest room, then paused in the doorway. Dominic? Yeah? You matter too. To me. She didn't wait for his response, just closed the door and leaned against it, her hand pressed to her racing heart. This was dangerous. This feeling building between them. This connection that had nothing to do with the baby and everything to do with two broken people finding something unexpected in each other. She couldn't afford to fall for him. Couldn't afford to trust that this was real and not just circumstance throwing them together. But as she climbed into bed and closed her eyes, Tessa couldn't deny the truth. It was already too late. The next morning, Tessa woke to find a note on the kitchen counter, just like always. But this one was different. Meeting ran long. Won't be back until late. There's breakfast in the fridge and lunch money on the counter. But more importantly, I meant what I said last night. Every word. We should talk when I get home. If you want. 2. No pressure. Tessa stared at the note, her fingers tracing the hurried scrawl of his handwriting. We should talk. 4 words that made her stomach flip with equal parts anticipation and dread. She'd meant what she said, too. He mattered to her. More than was safe. More than was smart. But what did that mean? What were they supposed to do with these feelings that had grown in the spaces between their carefully constructed boundaries? Her phone buzzed. Lily, coffee. I'm dying to hear about the family dinner. And don't even think about saying no. Tessa smiled despite herself. She needed this. Needed to talk to someone who knew her, who could help her make sense of the chaos in her head. Yes, but no coffee for me. Baby doesn't like it. Hot chocolate, then. Meet me at Rosie's in an hour? Deal. Rosie's Cafe was a small, cozy place tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. Tessa had discovered it during one of her long walks through the city, and it had quickly become her favorite escape. The kind of place where nobody recognized her, where she could just be another pregnant woman sipping hot chocolate and trying to figure out her life. Lily was already there when Tessa arrived, sitting at their usual corner table, two steaming mugs in front of her. "You look terrible," Lily said, as Tessa slid into the seat across from her. "Thanks. You always know just what to say." "I mean it. When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep. Actual sleep. Not lying awake thinking about your incredibly complicated life." Tessa wrapped her hands around the mug, grateful for the warmth. "It's hard to turn my brain off. So tell me, how was the Laurent family dinner? Did they hate you?" "Not all of them. His grandmother actually liked me, I think. His mother was protective, threatened me in the nicest possible way. And his father? Silent, judging, typical rich guy. And the cousin who insulted you." Tessa's expression darkened. "Dominic made him leave." Lily's eyebrows shot up. "He kicked family out? For you?" "Yeah." "Wow. That's... wow." "I know. So what else happened? Because you've got that look." "What look?" "The something major happened, and I don't know how to process it look. I've known you for 7 years, Tessa. I know all your looks." Tessa took a long sip of hot chocolate, buying time. Then, quietly, "He told me I matter to him." Lily went very still. "Matter how? Not just as the mother of his child. As me. Oh my God. And I told him he matters to me too." "Oh my God." "Lily, people are staring. I don't care." Lily leaned forward, her eyes wide. "You're falling for him. You're falling for the billionaire. Baby daddy." "I'm not." Tessa stopped, because denial felt pointless. "Maybe. I don't know. It's complicated." "Of course it's complicated, but that doesn't mean it's wrong, doesn't it? We barely know each other. We're only together because of a medical error. What if these feelings aren't real? What if it's just proximity and circumstance and what if it's real?" Lily interrupted. "What if this is one of those crazy stories where something terrible leads to something beautiful? Would that be so bad?" "Yes, because what happens when it falls apart? I lose him. I lose the stable home for my daughter. I lose everything all over again. Or," Lily said gently, "you gain everything. A partner, a family, a life you never expected but desperately need." Tessa's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I'm scared." "I know, but you're also braver than anyone I've ever met. You've survived things that would have broken most people. You can survive this too, whatever this turns out to be." They sat in silence for a moment, the cafe buzzing with life around them. Someone laughed at the counter. The espresso machine hissed. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the small dramas unfolding in its corners. "He left me a note this morning," Tessa said finally. "Said we should talk. About what he said last night." "And? Are you going to?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to run, to protect myself before I get hurt. But the other part wants to stay." "Yeah." Lily reached across the table, squeezing Tessa's hand. "Then stay. Take the risk. Because from what? You've told me about Dominic Laurent. He's taking a risk too. And maybe you both deserve to see where it goes." Tessa spent the rest of the day walking through the city, thinking about Lily's words, about Dominic's confession, about the impossible situation she'd found herself in. She walked through parks, where children played and parents watched with tired, contented eyes, past couples holding hands, lost in their own worlds. Through neighborhoods she'd never been able to afford, where life seemed easier, softer, more forgiving, and with each step, she felt something shifting inside her, a decision taking shape. She was tired of running, tired of protecting herself at the cost of everything else, tired of building walls that only left her alone and isolated. Maybe Lily was right. Maybe this was one of those crazy stories. Maybe something beautiful could come from something terrible. Maybe she owed it to herself, to their daughter, to find out. By the time she made it back to the penthouse, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Dominic wasn't home yet. His meeting must have run even later than expected. Tessa made herself dinner pasta with the fancy marinara sauce Dominic kept stocked because he'd noticed she liked it and settled on the couch with one of the baby books. But she couldn't focus. The words blurred together, meaningless. She was too busy rehearsing what she wanted to say, how she wanted to say it. Dominic, I think I'm falling for you. No, too dramatic. Dominic, I want to explore whatever this is between us. Too clinical. Dominic, I'm terrified, but I'm also ready. Too vulnerable. God, why was this so hard? She heard the elevator ding, heard the door open, heard Dominic's footsteps in the hallway. Her heart started racing. He appeared in the living room, loosening his tie, looking exhausted, but somehow still put together in that way only he could manage. When he saw her on the couch, his expression softened. "Hey," he said, "how was your day?" "Good. I met Lily for hot chocolate, walked around the city, thought about things." "What kind of things?" Tessa set the book aside and stood. "About what you said last night. About how I matter to you." Dominic went very still. "Okay." "And about what I said. About how you matter to me." "Okay," he repeated, quieter this time. Tessa crossed to where he stood, her hands trembling slightly. "I've spent my whole life protecting myself, building walls, not letting people in because every time I did, they left, or they hurt me. Or they proved that I was right not to trust them in the first place." "Tessa, let me finish," she said gently. "Please." He nodded. "When I found out I was pregnant, when I lost everything, I promised myself I wouldn't depend on anyone, that I'd figure it out alone, because alone was safer. Alone meant I couldn't get hurt again." "You don't have to be alone," Dominic said, his voice rough. "I know, and that terrifies me, because you've become someone I depend on, someone I trust, someone I—" She took a breath. "Someone I'm falling for, and I don't know what to do with." "That!" The air between them crackled with electricity. Dominic took a step closer, then another, until they were standing so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You want to know what I think?" he said quietly. "What?" "I think we stop fighting it. Stop pretending this is just about the baby or about circumstance. I think we admit that something happened between us, something real, and I think we see where it goes. And if it doesn't work out, then at least we tried. At least we gave ourselves a chance instead of spending the rest of our lives wondering what if." Tessa looked up at him. This man who'd been a stranger, then an obligation, then a reluctant partner. This man who'd defended her, protected her, stood up to his entire family for her. This man who'd somehow become the most important person in her world. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too." What if I'm not enough? What if I can't fit into your world? You don't have to fit into my world. We'll build a new one. Together. That's a really good line. I've been practicing all day. Tessa laughed, the tension breaking just slightly. Really? In every meeting. Drove my assistant crazy. She kept asking if I was okay. And what did you tell her? That I was trying to figure out how to tell the most stubborn, incredible woman I've ever met that I'm falling for her too. Tessa's breath caught. You're falling for me. I thought that was obvious. Say it again. I'm falling for you, Tessa. Wild, hard, fast, in a way that should probably terrify me, but mostly just makes me feel alive for the first time in years. Dominic. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, reverent. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to make promises or declarations. Just give us a chance. Let me prove to you that this is real. Tessa reached up, covering his hands with hers. Okay. Okay? Okay. We'll try. We'll see where this goes. Yeah? Yeah. The smile that spread across Dominic's face was unlike anything Tessa had ever seen. Unguarded, genuine, full of hope and relief, and something that looked dangerously close to joy. Can I kiss you? He asked. Tessa's heart stuttered. I thought you'd never ask. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to pull away. But she didn't. She rose up on her toes, meeting him halfway, and when their lips finally touched, it was like everything clicked into place. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. But then Dominic's hands slid into her hair, and Tessa's arms wrapped around his neck, and the kiss deepened into something more, something that felt like a promise, like a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. We're really doing this, he murmured. We're really doing this. No more guest room? Tessa pulled back slightly, searching his face. Are you asking me to move into your room? I'm asking if you want to. No pressure. We can take this as slow, as you need. Tessa thought about it. About the walls she'd built, the fear that had governed her life for so long. About the man standing in front of her, looking at her like she was something precious. Not tonight, she said finally. I need a little time to process everything. But soon, okay? Okay. Dominic kissed her forehead. Soon. They ordered takeout and spent the evening on the couch. Tessa curled against Dominic's side, his hand resting on her belly, feeling their daughter kick and move. They talked about everything and nothing. About childhood dreams and adult realities. About fears and hopes, and all the messy, complicated feelings that came with letting someone in. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Tessa felt something she'd almost forgotten. Peace. Not the absence of problems, God knew they still had plenty of those, but the presence of something good, something worth fighting for. As she drifted off to sleep that night, safe in the guest room, but no longer feeling quite so alone, Tessa let herself imagine a future she'd never dared to hope for. A future where she and Dominic weren't just co-parents, where they were partners, maybe even more. A future where their daughter grew up surrounded by love, not scandal. A future where Tessa Wilde, the girl who'd lost everything, finally found something worth keeping. It was just a dream, just a possibility. But for now, it was enough. 3 months later, Tessa was showing now. Really showing. At 6 months pregnant, there was no hiding the swell of her belly, no pretending she was just bloated or wearing loose clothes. The baby, their daughter, was making her presence known in increasingly insistent ways. Kicks at odd hours, hiccups that made Tessa's whole stomach jump, a constantly shifting weight that made finding a comfortable position nearly impossible. But despite the physical discomfort, Tessa had never been happier. The past 3 months had been transformative. That was the only word for it. She'd moved into Dominic's room 6 weeks ago. It had been terrifying at first, sharing a bed with him, waking up next to him, letting him see her at her most vulnerable. But Dominic had been patient, gentle, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. They'd taken things slowly, building trust brick by careful brick. And somewhere along the way, Tessa had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with him. She hadn't said it yet, hadn't found the courage to put words to the feeling that consumed her every time he looked at her, every time he touched her belly and talked to their daughter, every time he made her laugh or held her when she cried. But she felt it. God, did she feel it? Dominic had changed too. The cold, controlled businessman she'd first met had gradually revealed layers she'd never expected. He was funny, dry, sarcastic humor that caught her off guard. He was thoughtful, remembering small things she mentioned in passing, like her favorite flowers or the brand of tea she actually liked. He was vulnerable, sharing stories about his childhood, about the pressure and loneliness that had shaped him, about the dreams he'd abandoned to become the heir his family needed. They'd created a life together, a real life. Not the transactional arrangement they'd started with, but something messy and complicated and beautifully real. But Tessa still worked. Despite Dominic's repeated offers to support her completely, despite his arguments that she should be resting and preparing for the baby, Tessa had insisted on keeping her job. She needed it. Needed the independence, the sense of purpose, the reminder that she was more than just Dominic Laurent's pregnant girlfriend. Though the media had certainly noticed the shift in their relationship, the headlines had been relentless for weeks after they'd been photographed holding hands outside a doctor's appointment. From scandal to romance, Dominic Laurent and Tessa Wilde's unexpected love story Billionaire, Air Falls for Accidental Baby, Mama, the Laurent heir's pregnant girlfriend. Inside their unconventional romance, it had been exhausting, invasive, but somehow, with Dominic beside her, it had been bearable. The store where Tessa worked had become her sanctuary. Most of her co-workers had gotten used to her presence, and the customers were generally kind. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Most days were fine. Today was not one of those days. Tessa had woken up with a headache that wouldn't quit, the kind that pulsed behind her eyes and made every sound feel too loud. She'd considered calling in sick, but they were short-staffed, and she didn't want to leave her co-workers hanging. Dominic had noticed immediately. "You look pale," he'd said over breakfast. "Stay home. Rest." "I'm fine, Tessa." "I'm fine," she'd repeated, more firmly. "It's just a headache. I'll take something for it." He hadn't looked convinced, but he'd let it go. "Call me if you need anything. I can leave the office any time." "I know, but I won't need to. I promise." She'd kissed him goodbye, still a thrill, even after 3 months, and headed to work. The morning shift had been manageable. Busy enough to keep her distracted from the headache, but not so overwhelming that she couldn't keep up. She'd rung up customers, bagged groceries, smiled through the discomfort. But by noon, things had started to deteriorate. Dennis, her manager, was in one of his moods, the kind where nothing was good enough, where every small mistake was a catastrophe, where he prowled the aisles looking for someone to berate. Tessa had managed to avoid him most of the morning, but her luck ran out just before her lunch break. She'd been restocking the candy display near the registers when a customer approached with a complaint. The woman was middle-aged, well-dressed, with the kind of pinched expression that suggested she complained often and enjoyed it. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice sharp. "I bought milk here yesterday, and it was expired." Tessa straightened, her back protesting the movement. "I'm so sorry about that. Do you have your receipt? We can refund you or exchange it." "I don't have the receipt. I threw it away. But I definitely bought it here." "That's fine. If you bring the milk back, we can still—" "I'm not driving all the way back home to get milk. This is ridiculous. Your store sold me spoiled product, and you're making me jump through hoops. Ma'am, I'm not trying to make things difficult. I just need to follow store policy. I want to speak to your manager." Of course she did. Tessa's headache intensified. "I'll get him for you." She found Dennis in his office, as usual, and explained the situation. He sighed heavily, like she'd just told him she'd burned down the store. "Can't you handle a simple complaint?" he snapped. "I tried. She wants to speak to you directly." "Because you're incompetent." Tessa bit back a retort. "It wasn't worth it. I'll get back to work." "No, come with me. I want you to see how it's done." They returned to the register together. Dennis put on his customer service smile, the fake one, that never reached his eyes, and addressed the woman. "I understand we have a problem." The woman launched into her complaint again, embellishing it this time. The milk had been so spoiled it had made her sick. She'd nearly taken it back to the store last night, but hadn't had time. This was unacceptable customer service. Dennis nodded sympathetically. "I completely understand your frustration. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a full refund, plus a gift card for your trouble. How does that sound?" The woman's expression softened. "That's very generous. We value our customers, unlike some of our employees who don't seem to understand basic service." He glanced pointedly at Tessa. Tessa's face burned. He was blaming her in front of a customer. Again. The woman took her gift card and left, mollified. As soon as she was out of earshot, Dennis turned to Tessa. "That's how you handle a complaint. You make the customer happy. You don't argue with them or make them feel like they're the problem." "I wasn't arguing." "Yes, you were. And frankly, Tessa, this is becoming a pattern. You're slow. You're argumentative. You're a liability." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Dennis's voice rose. "You want to talk about fair? I took a chance on you. A pregnant woman with a scandal following her around. Do you know how many applications I passed over to give you this job?" Tessa's hands clenched at her sides. "I've been a good employee. I show up on time. I work hard. You're barely adequate. And honestly, I'm starting to think this was a mistake." His gaze dropped to her stomach. "You're what, 6 months along? How much longer are you even planning to work? Another month? 2? And then what? You'll take maternity leave and leave us scrambling?" "I haven't even discussed maternity leave because you know we can't afford to hold your position. You know that once you leave, you're not coming back." The words hit like a slap. "Are you firing me?" "I'm saying you should think carefully about your future here. Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look promising." A small crowd had gathered. Other customers, a few co-workers, all of them watching this humiliation play out in real time. Tessa wanted to cry, wanted to scream, wanted to tell Dennis exactly what she thought of him and his petty tyranny. But she couldn't, because she needed this job, needed the paycheck, however small, needed the independence it represented. So she swallowed her pride, her anger, her hurt. "I'll do better. See that you do." Dennis walked away, leaving Tessa standing there with tears burning behind her eyes and a dozen pairs of eyes watching her with pity and curiosity. She turned back to her register, trying to compose herself, trying to breathe through the humiliation. And that's when she saw him. Standing at the back of the store, partially hidden behind a display of canned goods, was Dominic. He was holding a shopping basket, but he wasn't shopping. He was watching, and the expression on his face, cold, furious, absolutely lethal, made Tessa's breath catch. How long had he been there? How much had he heard? Their eyes met across the store. Dominic's grip on the basket tightened until his knuckles went white. Then he set the basket down carefully and started walking toward the manager's office. "Oh, no! Dominic!" Tessa called out. But he didn't stop, didn't even slow down. She abandoned her register and followed him, her heart pounding. She knew that look, knew what it meant. He was about to do something that couldn't be undone. By the time she caught up, Dominic was already in Dennis's office. The door was open, and Dennis was looking up from his desk, startled. "Can I help you?" Dennis asked. "Are you the manager of this store?" Dominic's voice was ice. "Yes, who are you?" "Dominic Laurent, and I just watched you humiliate my girlfriend in front of your entire store." Dennis's face went pale. Recognition. Fear. "Mr. Laurent, I didn't know she was your—" "You knew exactly who she was. You knew she was pregnant with my child. You knew she was working here because she wanted independence, not because she needed the money. And you've been making her life miserable anyway." "That's not— I wasn't— I heard you," Dominic said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "I heard every word you said to her, and I heard what you've been saying for months. The comments about her pregnancy, the implications that she's a liability, the constant belittling. It's not personal. It's just business. It's personal to me." Dominic stepped closer, and Dennis actually flinched. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to Tessa. A real apology. Not the performative garbage you gave her last time I had to intervene. And then you're going to treat her with the respect she deserves for as long as she chooses to work here. Do you understand? You can't just come in here and— I own this building," Dominic said flatly. "I bought it 2 months ago, which means I'm your landlord. Which means if I want to triple your rent or find a reason to terminate your lease, I can. So yes, I absolutely can come in here and tell you how to treat your employees." Dennis's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You bought the building?" "I bought several buildings in this neighborhood. Real estate investment. But this one," he smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut. "This one was personal." Tessa's heart stuttered. He'd bought the building. For her. To protect her. "Now," Dominic continued, "are you going to apologize? Or am I going to make a phone call and have new tenants moved in by the end of the month?" Dennis stood on shaking legs. "I'll apologize." "Good choice." They walked back out to the registers together, Dominic, Dennis, and Tessa trailing behind them. The store had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. Dennis cleared his throat. "Tessa, I owe you an apology. What I said was inappropriate and unprofessional. You're a valued employee, and I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. I'm sorry." The apology was wooden, clearly forced, but it was an apology. Tessa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Additionally," Dennis continued, looking like each word was being physically dragged out of him, "I want to make it clear that your position here is secure. Maternity leave will be granted according to company policy, and your job will be waiting when you're ready to return." "Thank you," Tessa managed. Dennis fled back to his office. The store remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, people started moving again. Whispering. Shopping. Pretending they hadn't just witnessed their manager being taken down by a billionaire. Dominic turned to Tessa. "Can you take a break?" Yes, I think so." "Good. Let's talk." They walked outside into the parking lot. The afternoon sun was bright and warm, a stark contrast to the cold tension inside. "You bought the building," Tessa said. "Yes." "When?" "2 months ago. Right after the last incident with Dennis." "Why didn't you tell me?" Dominic ran a hand through his hair. "Because I knew you'd be angry. I knew you'd think I was overstepping, interfering, trying to control your life. You were. I was protecting you. I don't need protection. I need—" She broke off, frustrated. "I need to handle my own problems." "Why?" Dominic's voice rose to match hers. "Why do you have to handle everything alone? Why can't you let me help? Let me use my resources to make your life easier? Because it makes me feel weak. Because it makes me feel like I can't survive without you." "You can survive without me," Dominic said, his voice softening. "You've proven that 1,000 times over. But why should you have to? Why should you suffer just to prove you're strong enough? Because if I let you fix everything, then what happens if you leave? If this doesn't work out, I'll have nothing. I'll be nothing. You'll never be nothing." Dominic took her hands, his grip warm and steady. "You're the strongest person I know. And nothing I do, no building I buy, no manager I intimidate, changes that. You're strong because of who you are, not because of what you endure." Tessa's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared. I know. I'm scared that I'm getting too dependent on you. That I'm losing myself." "You're not losing yourself. You're just letting someone help carry the weight. There's a difference. Is there?" "Yes." Dominic pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her carefully, mindfully of her belly. "Let me tell you something. Watching him humiliate you, seeing you try to hold it together while he tore you down, it took everything in me not to tear that store apart. Not because I think you can't handle it, but because you shouldn't have to. Because you deserve better. Because I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Tessa pulled back, staring at him. "What?" "I love you," Dominic repeated, his voice steady. "I'm in love with you, Tessa. I have been for months. And I'm sorry if this is the wrong time or the wrong place, but I can't watch you suffer and pretend it doesn't destroy me. I can't stand by and do nothing when I have the power to help." "You love me?" "Yes. You bought a building because you love me. Among other reasons." "But yes," Tessa laughed, the sound watery and disbelieving. "That's insane." "I know. You're insane. I know that, too." She looked at him, this impossible man who'd bought a building to protect her from a petty manager, who'd stood up to his family for her, who'd somehow become the center of her entire world. "I love you too," she said. Dominic's expression transformed. "Yeah? Yeah, I have for a while. I just didn't know how to say it." "You just did." "I guess I did." He kissed her then, right there in the parking lot, with the afternoon sun beating down and the sound of traffic in the distance. Kissed her like she was precious, like she was everything, like he'd been waiting his whole life to find her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me," he said. "Quit this job. Let me take care of you." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I need this. I need to know I can stand on my own 2 feet. You can. You do. Every single day. Then let me keep proving it. At least until the baby comes. Please." Dominic sighed. "On one condition." "What?" "If Dennis so much as looks at you wrong, you tell me immediately. And we find you a different job. One where the manager isn't a complete ass." Tessa smiled. "Deal. And you let me buy you lunch." "That wasn't part of the deal. I'm amending the deal." "Fine. You can buy me lunch." They got in his car. He'd apparently left the office the moment he'd sensed something was wrong and drove to a small diner Tessa loved. They ordered burgers and milkshakes and sat in a corner booth, holding hands across the table. "I can't believe you bought a building for me," Tessa said, shaking her head. "I'd buy 100 buildings if it meant keeping you safe." "That's a terrible investment strategy." Good thing I have other people handling my investments. Tessa laughed, the tension from earlier finally draining away. I love you. Say it again. I love you. Dominic Laurent. I'm never getting tired of hearing that. Good. Because I plan on saying it a lot. They ate and talked and planned for the future, a real future now. Not just a co-parenting arrangement. They talked about where they'd live after the baby was born, whether Tessa would go back to work or stay home, whether Dominic would take paternity leave or if that would send his family into a collective coronary. They talked about names, about nursery colors, about all the small, ordinary things that felt extraordinary because they were building them together. And as Tessa sat across from the man she loved, her hand resting on her belly where their daughter kicked and moved, she felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind, but the solid, steady kind. The kind that came from knowing you weren't alone, that someone had your back. That love, however unexpected, however complicated, was worth fighting for. Her life hadn't turned out the way she'd planned. She wasn't an idol, wasn't on stage, wasn't living the dream she'd chased for 7 years. But maybe that was okay. Maybe this new dream, this unexpected, messy, beautiful life was better than anything she could have planned. Maybe sometimes the best things came from the worst mistakes. Maybe sometimes catastrophe led to grace. And maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 6 weeks later, Tessa had stopped working 3 weeks ago. Not because Dominic had pressured her, though. He'd been relieved when she'd finally agreed, but because her body had made the decision for her. At 8 months pregnant, standing for 8-hour shifts had become impossible. Her feet swelled. Her back ached constantly. And the baby had decided that Tessa's bladder was the perfect punching bag. Dennis had actually seemed disappointed when she'd given her notice. Whether that was because he'd genuinely come to appreciate her work, or because he was terrified of what Dominic might do if he seemed anything less than supportive, Tessa didn't know. She didn't particularly care either. She was done with that chapter of her life. Now, she spent her days preparing for the baby. The nursery was finished, a beautiful room in soft grays and whites with touches of lavender, filled with more stuffed animals and baby clothes than any one child could possibly need. Dominic's family had been enthusiastic in their gift-giving. Eveline had sent an antique cradle that had been in the Laurent family for 4 generations. Isabel had organized a baby shower that was less shower and more gala, complete with a guest list of 100 people Tessa had never met. Even Richard had softened slightly, sending a card with a generous check and a note that read simply, "For my granddaughter." The media attention had evolved too. The scandal had transformed into a romance, and people loved a good love story. Tessa and Dominic had done one interview, just one, with a reputable journalist who'd promised not to sensationalize where they'd told their story honestly. The medical error, the loss, the unexpected connection that had grown between them. The response had been overwhelming, supportive mostly, though there were still trolls and skeptics who insisted Tessa had trapped Dominic, that she was a gold digger, that this would all fall apart the moment the baby was born. Tessa had learned to ignore them, learned that other people's opinions didn't define her reality. Her reality was this: she was in love with Dominic Laurent. He was in love with her, and in a few weeks, they'd welcome their daughter into a world that was chaotic and imperfect but filled with love. That was enough. It was a Sunday morning when everything changed. Tessa woke to a strange sensation, not quite pain, but a tightening across her belly that made her catch her breath. She lay still for a moment, waiting to see if it would happen again. It did. 5 minutes later, then again, and again. "Dominic?" she said quietly. He was already awake, reading something on his tablet. He set it down immediately, his attention fully on her. "What's wrong?" I think I'm having contractions." Dominic went very still. You think or you know? I think. They're not that strong yet. But they're regular. How regular? Every 5 minutes or so. Okay. Dominic swung out of bed, suddenly all efficiency. Okay, we should time them. Make sure they're consistent. Do you need anything? Water? Food? Should I call the doctor? Dominic, breathe. I'm breathing. You're panicking. I'm not panicking. I'm preparing, Tessa smiled despite the growing discomfort. It's probably early labor. We have time. The doctor said first babies usually take a while. Usually, but not always. What if she comes fast? What if something goes wrong? What if Dominic? Tessa reached for his hand, squeezing it. We're okay. She's okay. Everything is going to be fine. He looked at her, his eyes wide with fear and wonder and love. How are you so calm? Because one of us has to be, and apparently it's going to be the pregnant woman in active labor. You're sure you're in labor? Another contraction hit, stronger this time. Tessa breathed through it, her hand tightening on Dominic's. Yeah, I'm sure. They spent the next few hours timing contractions, pacing the apartment, trying to distract themselves with television and conversation. Dominic called the doctor, who confirmed that yes, this sounded like early labor, and yes, they should head to the hospital once the contractions were 3 to 5 minutes apart and lasting a minute each. By noon, they were in the car. By 1 o'clock, they were checked into a private room at the hospital, the same hospital where this entire journey had begun, though Tessa tried not to think about that. By 3 o'clock, Tessa was seriously reconsidering every life choice that had led to this moment. I can't do this, she gasped, gripping Dominic's hand hard enough to leave marks. I changed my mind. I don't want to do this anymore. You're doing amazing, Dominic said, his voice steady even though his face was pale. You're so strong. I'm not strong. I'm dying. I'm definitely dying. You're not dying. You're bringing our daughter into the world. She can stay in there. I changed my mind. The nurse, a kind woman named Patricia, who'd been coaching Tessa through the contractions, smiled. You're doing great, honey. We're almost there. Almost where? Death? Transition. The hardest part. But also the last part before you start pushing. Pushing sounds worse. It's different. But you can do it, Tessa wanted to argue, but another contraction hit, and all she could do was breathe through it, squeezing Dominic's hand like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to earth. When it finally passed, she looked at him, really looked at him. He'd been by her side for hours, hadn't complained once, had let her curse at him and squeeze his hand, and had just kept telling her she was strong. She was amazing. She could do this. I love you, she said. I love you too. Even though I'm sweaty and gross and probably said terrible things to you, even though you're going to be such a good dad. Dominic's eyes filled with tears. You think so? I know so. And you're going to be an incredible mom. I'm terrified. Me too. Good. We can be terrified together. Another contraction, stronger, longer. Tessa cried out, and Dominic held her through it, murmuring words of encouragement and love. The doctor came in, Dr. West, who'd been with them through the entire pregnancy. All right, Tessa, let's check your progress. A brief examination. Then a smile. You're ready. It's time to push. Terror and excitement flooded through Tessa in equal measure. Now? Now. Okay, I can do this. You can do this, Dominic echoed, positioning himself beside her, supporting her back. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. And so Tessa pushed, again and again and again, through the pain and the fear and the exhaustion, through the moments where she was sure she couldn't go on, where her body felt like it was tearing apart. But Dominic was there, his voice in her ear, his hand in hers, his presence the anchor that kept her grounded. I see the head, Dr. West announced. One more push, Tessa. One more big push. Tessa bore down with everything she had left, a scream tearing from her throat. And then, suddenly, miraculously, the pressure was gone, and the room filled with the sound of a baby crying. "It's a girl," Dr. West said, laughing. "A beautiful, healthy girl," Tessa sobbed, reaching for her daughter as the doctor placed her on her chest. She was tiny, perfect, covered in vernix and blood, and absolutely the most beautiful thing Tessa had ever seen. "Hi," Tessa whispered, her tears falling onto her daughter's face. "Hi, baby girl. I'm your mom. I'm your mom." Beside her, Dominic was crying too, his hand gentle on the baby's head. "She's perfect. Tessa, she's absolutely perfect. We made her. We made her." The baby's cries softened as she heard their voices, her tiny eyes trying to open, her hand curling around Tessa's finger with surprising strength. "What's her name?" Patricia asked gently. Tessa and Dominic had discussed names for months, had gone through dozens of options, unable to agree on anything. But now, looking at their daughter, Tessa knew. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope." Dominic smiled through his tears. "Hope Laurent. Hope Laurent Wild," Tessa corrected. "Both our names. Because she's both of ours." "Hope Laurent Wild," Dominic repeated, testing it out. "It's perfect. She's perfect. You're perfect." They stayed like that for a long time, just the three of them, in their own little world. The nurses bustled around, checking vitals and cleaning up, but Tessa barely noticed. She was too focused on her daughter, on the impossible, miraculous reality of her. Eventually, they took Hope to clean her up properly and run the necessary tests. Tessa felt the loss immediately, even though she knew it was only for a few minutes. "We're parents," she said to Dominic, still not quite believing it. "We're parents," he agreed. "Are you ready for this?" "Absolutely not. You?" "Not even a little bit." "Good. We'll figure it out together." When they brought Hope back, swaddled in a soft pink blanket with a tiny hat on her head, Tessa took her carefully, marveling at how something so small could feel so heavy with meaning. "Your family will want to meet her," Tessa said. "They can wait. Right now, I just want it to be us." "Yeah, me too." They spent the rest of the evening in that quiet room, taking turns holding Hope, watching her sleep, marveling at every tiny feature. Her nose, which looked like Dominic's, her mouth, which looked like Tessa's, her hands, which somehow looked like both of them and neither of them at the same time. "Thank you," Dominic said suddenly. Tessa looked up from where she was nursing Hope, a strange, uncomfortable, oddly beautiful experience. "For what?" "For her, for us, for giving me something I didn't even know I needed." "You gave me the same thing." "Yeah?" "Yeah, a family, a future, hope." She smiled at the double meaning, in every sense of the word. Dominic leaned over and kissed her forehead, then kissed Hope's. "I love you both so much. It terrifies me." Good terrified or bad terrified? The best kind of terrified. 2 days later, bringing Hope home was surreal. The penthouse had been transformed. The nursery was ready, of course, but there were also flowers everywhere, gifts from well-wishers, from Dominic's family, from Lily and Tessa's few other friends. The fridge was stocked with meals that Isabel had arranged to be delivered. Everything was prepared, organized, perfect. And yet, as Tessa settled onto the couch with Hope in her arms, she felt completely overwhelmed. "What if I do it wrong?" she asked. Dominic sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "Do what wrong?" "All of it. Being a mom. What if I mess her up?" "You won't. You don't know that. I know you. I know your heart. I know that you'll love her and protect her and give her everything you never had. That's all any kid needs. And if it's not enough, then we'll figure it out. Together. Like we've figured out everything else." Hope made a small noise. Her face scrunching up in that way that Tessa was already learning meant she was about to cry. "She's hungry again," Tessa said, adjusting her shirt. "She's always hungry." "She gets that from you." "Hey, I resent that." Tessa laughed, the sound tired but genuine. As Hope latched on and began nursing, Tessa felt some of the anxiety ease. She could do this. They could do this. The intercom buzzed. Dominic got up to answer it, then turned to Tessa with a slightly apologetic expression. "My family is downstairs. They want to meet Hope." Tessa's first instinct was to say no. She was exhausted, emotional, not ready to share her daughter with anyone yet. But she also knew this was important. Hope was the Laurent heir, whether Tessa liked it or not. And Dominic's family had been better lately, more accepting. "Okay," she said, "but only for a little while." "Only for a little while," Dominic promised. 20 minutes later, the penthouse was full. Isabel came in first, her eyes immediately filling with tears when she saw Hope. "Oh, Dominic, she's gorgeous." "She is," Dominic agreed proudly. Richard was more reserved, but even he softened when Hope gripped his finger with her tiny hand. Strong grip. "That's good." Eveline was the last to hold her, and when she did, something shifted in the old woman's expression. "Hello, little one. I'm your great-grandmother, and I'm going to spoil you absolutely rotten." "Please don't," Tessa said, but she was smiling. Too late. Already bought her a pony. She's 2 days old. It's never too early to start planning. They stayed for an hour, passing Hope around carefully, cooing over her, asking Tessa how she was feeling, telling Dominic he looked exhausted. It was overwhelming and intrusive, and also nice, warm, like what Tessa imagined a real family felt like. When they finally left, promising to visit again soon, Tessa sagged against Dominic in relief. "That wasn't so bad," he said. "Your grandmother bought our daughter a pony. That's actually pretty restrained for her." What would unrestrained look like? A stable of ponies and possibly a small castle. Tessa laughed, then yawned. "I'm so tired. Go sleep. I'll watch her." "You're tired too." "I'm fine. Dominic, go. Sleep. I'll wake you when she's hungry." Tessa wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She stumbled to their bedroom and collapsed onto the bed, asleep almost instantly. She woke 3 hours later to the sound of Dominic's voice. Soft, gentle, singing. She got up quietly and padded to the nursery. The door was cracked open, and through it she could see Dominic in the rocking chair, Hope cradled in his arms, swaying gently as he sang a lullaby. His voice was terrible off-key and uncertain, but it was also the most beautiful thing Tessa had ever heard, because he was trying, because he was already the father Hope needed, because he loved their daughter with the same fierce intensity that he loved Tessa. She stood there for a long moment, watching them, her heart so full it hurt. This was her family. This impossible, unexpected, beautiful family. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. Not for the debut she'd lost, not for the dreams she'd abandoned, not for the life she'd thought she wanted. Because this right here, right now, was everything. 3 months later, Hope was 3 months old, and Tessa's life had settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. The days were exhausting, filled with feedings and diaper changes, and the constant worry that came with new parenthood. But they were also filled with moments of pure joy. Hope's first smile, the way she recognized Tessa's voice and turned her head, the little coos and gurgles that were her first attempts at communication. Dominic had taken paternity leave, something that had scandalized his family and impressed the media. He'd spent those first 2 months at home, learning how to change diapers and swaddle and function on 3 hours of sleep. He'd been awkward at first, terrified of breaking their tiny daughter, but he'd learned quickly. Now, watching him comfort Hope when she cried, or make ridiculous faces to get her to smile. Tessa fell in love with him all over again. They'd settled into their roles. Not perfectly. There were still arguments about whose turn it was to get up in the middle of the night. Still moments of frustration and exhaustion. But they worked through them. Together. Lily came over often, declaring herself Hope's favorite aunt, and spoiling her accordingly. Dominic's family visited regularly, though Isabel had learned to call first, and Eveline had so far restrained herself to only 3 ponies. The media attention had faded to a low hum. Occasionally, someone would snap a photo of Tessa and Dominic out with Hope, and it would make the rounds online. But mostly, people had moved on to newer scandals. Tessa had started thinking about the future, about what she wanted to do now that her life had stabilized. She didn't want to go back to retail, didn't want to go back to pursuing an idol career that no longer felt like her dream, but she'd always loved dance, and she'd always loved teaching. What if I opened a dance studio? She'd asked Dominic one night while Hope slept between them in bed, technically against all the safety recommendations, but neither of them could resist keeping her close. A dance studio? For kids, especially kids who can't afford expensive lessons. I could use my training for something good. Give other kids the opportunity I had, Dominic had smiled. I think that's perfect, and I'd be happy to help fund it. I want to do it myself. Then let me be your first investor. Business investment. I'll expect a return and everything. You're impossible. You love me anyway. I do. God help me, I really do. Now, 3 months later, Tessa was in the early stages of making it happen. She'd found a space, a small studio in a neighborhood that needed it, had started planning classes and reaching out to community centers. It was slow going, especially with a 3-month-old, but it felt right. It felt like building something that was hers, something that mattered. It was a Sunday evening, and they were home. Just the 3 of them. Hope was on her playmat, attempting to grab at the colorful toys dangling above her. Dominic was on the floor beside her, making encouraging noises every time she came close to succeeding. Tessa watched them from the couch, her heart full. "Dominic," she said. "Yeah? Marry me." He looked up, startled. "What?" "Marry me," Tessa repeated. "I know we said we'd take things slow. I know we didn't want to rush into anything, but I don't want slow anymore. I want forever. I want our daughter to grow up knowing her parents chose each other, chose this family. I want to be your wife." Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed a bright, joyful sound. "I was going to ask you." "What?" He got up, went to his jacket hanging by the door, and pulled out a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, trying to find the perfect moment. The perfect words." Tessa's hand flew to her mouth. "You have a ring. I have a ring." He came back to the couch, kneeling in front of her. "Tessa Wilde, you are the strongest, bravest, most incredible woman I've ever known. You've turned my entire life upside down in the best possible way. You've given me a daughter, a family, a purpose beyond money and legacy. You've taught me what it means to love someone completely, without reservation. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Tessa's face. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple, elegant band with a single diamond. Perfect. Just like everything else about them. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." They kissed, long and sweet, while Hope made happy noises from her playmat, oblivious to the moment, but somehow part of it anyway. When they pulled apart, both smiling through tears, Tessa looked at the ring on her finger and felt something she'd never quite felt before. Complete. Not because Dominic completed her, she'd learned that she was complete on her own, but because they'd chosen to build a life together, to face the chaos and the challenges and the unexpected joys as partners. "When should we do it?" Dominic asked. "The wedding?" "I don't know." "Soon? How soon?" Next month? Next month? Dominic laughed. My mother will have a heart attack. Then let's elope. You want to elope? I want to marry you. I don't care about a big wedding or a fancy dress or any of it. I just want to be your wife. Dominic cupped her face in his hands. Then let's do it. Let's get married. Really? Really. Just us and Hope. And maybe Lily and my grandmother, because they'd both kill us if we didn't include them. Tessa laughed. Deal! They called Lily, who screamed so loud they had to hold the phone away from their ears. They called Eveline, who simply said, about time, and demanded to be in charge of arranging everything. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, Tessa and Dominic got married. It was small, intimate, just them. Hope, Lily, Eveline, and a judge in the garden of the Laurent estate. Tessa wore a simple white dress. Dominic wore a suit. Hope wore a tiny dress that Eveline had commissioned and slept through the entire ceremony. There were no photographers, no media, no spectacle, just love, pure and simple and real. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, when Dominic kissed her with Hope cradled between them, Tessa felt a sense of rightness that she'd never experienced before. This was her family, her forever, and it had all started with a catastrophic mistake that had felt like the end of the world. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything. 5 years later, Tessa stood in her dance studio, watching a class of 8-year-olds stumble through a basic routine. They were a mess, completely out of sync, tripping over their own feet, giggling when they messed up. They were perfect. The studio had been open for 4 years now and was thriving. She taught classes 6 days a week, had hired 2 assistant instructors, and had started a scholarship program for kids who couldn't afford lessons. It was everything she'd dreamed of, and more. The door opened, and Dominic walked in, Hope's hand in his. She was 5 now, all long legs and dark curls and her father's serious eyes. She lit up when she saw Tessa. Mama! Hi, baby. Tessa dismissed the class, reminding them to practice, and scooped Hope up, despite the fact that she was getting too big for it. How was school? Good. We learned about butterflies. Did you? Tell me about it. As Hope launched into an enthusiastic explanation of butterfly metamorphosis, Tessa caught Dominic's eye over their daughter's head. He smiled that soft, private smile that was just for her, and mouthed, I love you. I love you too, she mouthed back. Their life wasn't perfect. They still argued sometimes, still had moments of stress and exhaustion, still faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, but they faced them together. And that made all the difference. Hope squirmed to get down, running off to explore the studio, and Dominic wrapped his arms around Tessa from behind. Happy? He asked. So happy, Tessa said. You? Happier than I ever thought possible. Even though I made you take out the trash this morning? Even though Hope woke us up at 5 because she had a nightmare? Even though your mother is coming for dinner and will definitely criticize something? Dominic laughed. Okay, maybe not that part. Tessa turned in his arms, looping hers around his neck. We did good, didn't we? With Hope. With us. We did amazing. I never thought my life would turn out like this. When everything fell apart, when I lost my debut and found out I was pregnant, I thought it was the end of everything. And now? Now I know it was just the beginning. She stood on her toes and kissed him. The beginning of the best part. Hope ran back over, tugging on Dominic's sleeve. Daddy, can I take dance class with Mama? You want to take dance class? Tessa asked. Yes, I want to learn to dance like you did. Tessa's heart swelled. Then we'll sign you up. Starting next week. Really? Really? Hope threw her arms around both of them, squealing with excitement. And as Tessa held her daughter and her husband, Standing in the studio she'd built with her own determination and hard work, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the catastrophic mistake that had brought them together, for the hospital error that had changed everything, for the journey from scandal to love, from loss to hope, from broken to whole. Her life hadn't turned out the way she'd planned. It had turned out better. And as they left the studio together, Hope chattering excitedly about dance class and Dominic laughing at something she said, Tessa knew with absolute certainty this was exactly where she was meant to be. This was home. This was forever. This was her hidden heir, not the scandal the media had named, but the hope she'd found in the darkest moment. And it was more than enough. It was everything.